office has been involved in reviewing the draft and final audit report, which was the result of a thorough and transparent process followed by GPP in compliance with the professional auditing standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Asdarian, do you have any other comments that you wanted to follow up on?
Is this turn onable? There we go. I do, and I would also invite my peer, Mr. Shudo from N1, to offer any remarks that he would like to offer as well. I'd simply like to begin, by thanking the folks that have been involved in this effort. We began this a year ago, and it was the result of years of questions, and so the formal process began a year ago. And so I want to thank Mr. Metcalf and the GPP Analytics team for their dedication to this project. I'm sure they didn't imagine being here a year later. I'd like to thank the Auditor Controller, Rupert Shah, for her team's engagement and their administration of the contract. I'd like to thank our finance manager, Nan Kim, and her team at the WRA for their good work and participation in this. And then thankfully, lastly, I'd like to thank Mr. Shudo and his M1 team that dedicated an enormous amount of time and resources to help present this information here today. Backing up a little bit, what are we trying to accomplish here? And I'm going to want to zoom out to the big picture, right? All of this relates to a very complex project that we have, commonly referred to as the Castroville Seawater Intrusion Project, but it also includes the Salinas Valley Reclamation Project and the Salinas River Diversion Facility. And these facilities operate in concert to deliver recycled water to 12,000 acres of agricultural production in and around the Castroville area. So I want to maintain the big picture and the importance of what we're trying to achieve here in the scale of the audit. So the audit, began about a year ago, and again, I want to commend people for their commitment to the quality, not the quickness. There were opportunities where we at the agency wanted to spend time to ensure that it was right and accurate, and I know there were times where we at the agency wanted to provide M1W all the opportunity they needed to investigate and respond to questions. Clearly, an audit such as this, it presents opportunities to improve our processes. There's always room for improvement. And I think, most importantly, it presents opportunities to strengthen our relationships. And so, we have begun that process some months ago. The agency and M1 began implementing changes in response to the audit's early findings, and we continue with that work and in that spirit. We've established a joint agencies leadership group comprised of the general managers, the board chairs and vice chairs, and we'll be looking to our various staff to provide technical support as we begin to roll up our sleeves and dive into addressing the audit's findings and recommendations. Beyond the audit, we also look forward to addressing other issues related to water resource management in and around the CSIP area and operational issues. It's important to remember that the agreement that we're working underneath today is coming in on 10 years old. And there are a lot of pieces of that agreement that are in fact nearly 30 years old. And so this, I think, provides an important opportunity for us to improve on what we've been able to do so successfully over all the years. But it's important that we don't lose sight of that success as well. When you consider, 10,000 acre feet on average of recycled water being delivered to highly valued farmlands in and around the Castroville area, that's 250,000 acre feet, over the lifetime of this project. No small feat. So incredibly important, not only, to the farming and the farm culture in that CSIP area, but to the rural residents who still rely on wells, to the disadvantaged unincorporated communities in and around the area, and of course to the city of Salinas, where the march of seawater intrusion continues to head. So a lot is at stake at the success of this project. I think historically, you know, when we step back and we look at the big picture, it has been a stunning success. Institutionally, of course, there's room for improvement. There always is. And we are committed to working together to make those improvements and to perpetuate the successes we've had. You know, we will do a better job, but I think we can't lose sight of the big picture. So I look forward to any questions folks have, and would certainly offer opportunity to my counterpart, Mr. Shudo, to offer any remarks he may have.
Thanks, Ara. Which way are you going?
Behind you.
Supervisors, my name is Paul Shudo. I'm the general manager at Monterey One Water, and thank you for this opportunity to speak on the audit. Number one, just as Ara mentioned, we appreciate the long-valued partnership with Water Resources Agency. He put it in terms of that 250,000 acre-feet. Different way to look at it, 101 billion gallons. So we certainly hope that continues for the next 26 years as we've been already operating. You do note in the back of the audit, we have a response, the Monterey One Water response, that points out some of the nuances that we feel there's just a disagreement on terminology, on some of the details, et cetera. So we very much appreciate the audit and also acknowledge we have some work to do. I think it was on your schedule. The first time we saw a draft was beginning of March at some point, and it was startling, and we took it very seriously. And that is not the type of organization we are or finances that we run. So many of those comments we started working on immediately in terms of some of the procedures and policies and cross-training within our finance department, making some changes as Ara alluded to. In addition to the leadership group that Ara mentioned between the 2 board chairs and the 2 GMs meeting, Ara and I have met a number of times just trying to get into some of the details that we can and try to make things better. Now, having said that, Julia mentioned it. We audit our finances every year by a firm that is 96 years old. On top of that, for over a decade, we've received awards from Government Finance Officers Association on our audit. We're audited by the state of California, EPA, US EPA, Bureau of Reclamation on all the loans and other things we have. So I certainly view this as a snapshot of this agreement and the expenses associated with it. We need to get better on that, and we need to be more transparent. But I think there is more communication. If I may, I know there was the request for some time by Monterey One. Frankly, and to be entirely honest, and I hopefully Julian and Ara agree, we didn't get information to the auditors quick enough from my perspective, from a professional manner. So we did request that time to be able to provide more. That is on me, that is on our organization, and it's another thing that we're working on. So since March, we have been implementing changes. Our staffs are now meeting on a monthly basis to go over a lot of this information that was laid out, and we will continue to work towards resolution and agreement so we can move forward within our partnership. Beyond that, just want to say thank you for this opportunity, and obviously we'll be keeping doing this. So with that, any questions?
Thank you for the presentation and comments from both of you. What I'd like to do is just bring it back to the board first for questions, and we'll go to the public, and then maybe we can get some comments and direction. So purely a question, Supervisor Lopez?
Yeah, just, reading this, obviously there's a lot here, and I spent some time with it over the weekend and through yesterday. And one thing that I think it's a question more for Julian, given everything that's here on the reclamation fund balance of $600,000. I know we raised not knowing whether it's there or not and who owns it. And from the response, it feels like there's a feeling that issue is closed. But from the audit side, it doesn't feel it's closed. Can I get clarification from you about that particular fund, the amount in there, and whether or not we're clear on who owns it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Vice Chair. I wish I could give you a very certain answer, but the information we were able to obtain, actually, the more information we got made it less clear. When we first looked at this issue, there was almost no information about the error. And with that, it was a very simple binary choice in my mind that without supporting information and documentation, it should be returned. The information we did get back from the financial auditor and from Monterey One did not add clarity. It sounds like there was some confusion both on the auditor's part and on Monterey One Water's part during the time it occurred. There was some postings that were to be made, and then they weren't supposed to be made, and then both parties weren't clear on who was supposed to do what. We do not feel comfortable without more information making a determination on it, because it really truly could go either way. And without more information, it didn't seem appropriate, and I don't think that information may exist. The staff that had worked on the financial audit were reportedly long gone. They weren't looking at it from this perspective, and I think that's one of the problems is because the financial audit just looked at the agency-wide finances when it made an opinion. It didn't look at on a fund level and concern itself where the $600,000 sat. The audit they conducted was not designed to make that determination. So there may not be enough information to go back at those records. That's why we left it ambiguous.
So a clarifying question then, the amount that we're talking about today with a potential 1.1 does not include that 600,000?
Correct. The 1.1 draws exclusively from finding one related to the indirect cost allocation plan.
All right, any response on that? I mean, is the issue still open then, or are we just leaving it cloudy and saying 600,000's in the air? I mean, I hate to leave that amount of money out there under question if it should be returned.
Thank you, Supervisor Lopez. So my understanding is our staffs have got together with some of the details, the general ledger inputs, and I don't mean to speak for non or on our side Susan, but they had a meeting of the minds and there's a understanding that it is appropriate the way it is not being allocated to a Water Resources Agency. Now, I'm going to point out one quick thing. Julian's absolutely right. We had some retirements that when he came in, the staff that had typically done or prepared for audit was not there. We have since brought them back. So they are retired annuitant, one specifically, a retired annuitant working for us that had been in the accounting supervisor position for about 20 years. We've also brought in a retired annuitant as an acting CFO to drill down into a lot of this as well. So there may be some additional information that was shared with non that previously we had not provided GPP.
So is that, would you concur that, Ara, that we feel that the money should stay with M1 versus coming back to us at this point?
So I appreciate, Paul and his folks sitting down, meeting with our financial folks. I haven't seen the results of that, of that meeting and heard directly their conclusions. What I will say is that, through the establishment of this leadership group, we're beginning to identify the issues that we're going to walk through. This would be among them, right, where staff is getting together and they're demonstrating their conclusions and we're talking about it ourselves. So we're beginning to lay out that order of operations here because there are the findings and the financial consequences that happen in the past, but there are financial transactions happening each and every day. And so, beginning our work in terms of improving the agreement and our financial relationships in the future, I think it behooves us to start with, where we are right now in terms of improving controls and so forth, and then we can work through some of these other fixed questions. So I think it's still an open question, but I appreciate the fact that M1 has made staff available to explain it.
So I came into this with a question about it, and I'll say I'm walking away with just as many questions. I personally don't feel it's concluded, so as we move forward, I would appreciate if we could continue to report back on that question, getting as much clarity as possible. I know, Julian, you'll probably be out of the process after this, but as we work through this together, to me, that is still an open question. I'd love to see that addressed as we move forward.
Yep, fair.
Thank you.
Question, Supervisor Askew?
Yeah, sort of question, but also comment. I just want to say that I really appreciate the clarity that this audit has provided. Going back in time, there's been sort of, accusations and claims of frustration, and I heard the frustration, but being able to have the frustration articulated into specific issues. This is what we're frustrated about. This is where the concern is. This is the area that needs to be clarified. This is where we have a disagreement. I think is the first, for me, is a tremendous first step to how we go about moving forward together. And I just want to really appreciate the leadership team that we have in place at both agencies, and the willingness of you both to put egos and personalities and emotions aside and say, how do we collectively move forward? How do we recognize that there are disagreements? How do we recognize that we're working off of an agreement, this, from 2015 that really does have, according to this audit, I knew it had gray areas and there were disagreements in it, but it's clear where those big concern areas are. And so how we, reconcile these issues and concerns of this audit finding from the past, while also remaining committed to let's get this right. Let's figure out how we move forward together. I really appreciate the leadership that we have around the table with the commitment for holding a vision about how we best move forward. And for me, one of the biggest, let's address all of these things, but really I think the audit finding around how we make sure that concerns are clearly brought forward to both boards so that we have the ability to, not let things fester in the future is really one of, I think, the critical pieces for me. Because had I known, or had someone been able to communicate to me, this is where the concern is, this is where the issue is, I think we would have, 4 years ago when I first showed up, it would have helped me, I think, guide a conversation forward, or at least have conversations with our staff. I also just want to say I appreciate all the time you spent on the phone with me, just providing background and context and path forward. Same with you, Paul, and your boards as well. I think I've had conversations with all of them, just trying to make sure that I understand some of the nuances that are in front of us. But with the commitment to let's figure out how do we move forward together and do what's right for the shared constituents that we're providing this water for. So thank you.
Does the board have any other questions? Yes, Supervisor.
Before we go to public comments, I want to kind of just provide a different perspective, because I know it sounds like we're going to work together on these. It sounds like kind of kumbaya, but it wasn't always like that. And that's why we had to get an audit. So I want to have a frank conversation in hopes that we will fix the issues, because we got to a point where an audit was initiated, because it seems the frustrations and issues have been going on for years. Even before ARA joined the Monterey County Water Resources, these issues were concerns, and they were even beyond what's in this audit. There was issues back in 21, 22. I was a member of the GSA, whether it was pumping in the 180, 400, other issues outside the scope of this audit. So this has been ongoing. But this opening letter of this audit report by the Water Resources Agency, kind of, even despite everything that happened over this last year, it was a meticulous audit, very thorough, very clear, went over a wide range of issues that, as a result, we hope to fix in an agreement, and the procedures and accounting and paperwork and timekeeping. All those things are all good things that should happen. And I appreciate the additional perspective of our county auditor, Rupa Shah, who also took a close look at us and just shared her opinion on the methodology and her thoughts on how this audit was conducted. But the response, though, is what had me taken aback, Mr. Shudo. The opening letter talks about the two key responses was, in finding 6, it said this audit was commissioned with a preconceived bias. That was one. That one, it was hard to, despite everything that was just said, that's not the kind of response you want to hear. Usually audits I used to be a member of the Joint Legislative Audit in Sacramento, so we dealt with a lot of audits of state agencies. Usually when it gets to a point where even an audit is being requested in that legislative committee, it was because there had been a lot of issues going on for many years previously, and finally it got to a point where an audit was merited, and I could say 100% of the time an audit was done or there was resistance, it didn't work well for the person being audited, but every audit helped that state agency or local agency, because we even did one on Salinas Valley Memorial Hospital. It ended up in a lot of improvements of those government entities. But then the second one that troubled me was the response to finding 7, and it says M1W states that the water resource agencies, through inaction, accepted the methodology used by M1W, and for me that was kind of also hard to see. It's saying when there's allegations that we're not getting all the information, there's a lack of transparency. Water Resource can't go in and review all your books when it wishes to. There was a lack of communication and sharing of information. It's hard to argue that then, because you didn't say anything, now you in essence agreed to what we were doing. That's a hard argument to make as a lawyer. That would never fly in court. Whether it's a civil issue or if it's a case of embezzlement, you couldn't just say, you didn't say anything, so therefore you in essence agreed to what we were doing. That's not a very compelling argument to make here. So I just wanted to put that into perspective. I know we have 2 very capable leaders of these agencies. Our histories, our futures are intertwined because of the important work we do with each other. I want us to see to fix that. There is that big elephant in the room question about the amount owed. Our Water Resources Agency for years has been on a very tight budget, very limited resources, and it's doing very well with the limited resources it has. But certainly that's a significant amount over the last 4 years that we believe is owed according to this audit. And then there was a lot of other issues as well, right? On staffing, those were issues that I think communication, if the agency was going to be billed, those should be things that are put in writing, that are agreed to by the parties, saying you're being billed for this. And there was other discussion about outreach, that should have been something that should have been billed to the agency, but the county has its own legislative team, right? We have our own grant writer. So there's resources that are available to the Water Resources Agency already through the county that we pay for. So that just also, I also question some of those arguments made on some of those other potential billings to the Water Resource Agency. So I just wanted to put that perspective. I want to hear from the public, but I think I'm in agreement with my other colleagues that we want to see these improvements made, these recommendations implemented, so that we can avoid these issues in the future. I think that's the goal. The money issue, yes, it needs to be resolved, but the remainder of the issues, I think, are issues that are very achievable and that I think will help us have better communication, transparency, and then just improve the relationships between 2 very important agencies here serving the people and the businesses of Monterey County. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. I want to thank you both very much, and all of you as well, and you as well, Kelly, for the work that you've put into this. I think we're all very appreciative of it. I think the elephant in the room, though, is something that we've not even mentioned today, and that is that we have a severe water problem in Monterey County. And I think it's something that deserves a regional approach. And my hope is, as we work through the problems that we've been presented with today, it doesn't keep our eye off the real problem that we have, which is working together well to be able to find a solution and to be able to move forward with the amount of water that we're going to need, for the amount of housing that we're going to need, for the number of people that we're going to have. So as we move forward in repairing and ensuring that we've got the numbers all right, which is absolutely critical, so that there is trust, rebuilt trust perhaps, on the side of both agencies and other agencies that are equally involved in our quest, we can't lose sight of what we're really here for, and that is to ensure that there is plenty of water for all of the needs that we have. So just wanted to clear that before we got to public contact. So thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I'll go out to the public unless you felt that there was anything you want to respond to from board comments.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dayton, you have 2 minutes.
Yes, Kevin Dayton, first of all, thank you for releasing this audit to the public. I'm going to offer a couple of specific recommendations to add to the ones that the staff recommended that I think are very important. The first one is to direct staff to proceed with the source water supply audit. And I remember I called in on the August 3rd, 2023 Joint Leadership Committee meeting, and I saw that there, and that's what I was interested in. And why am I interested in it? Well, you got all from me today, a packet of material. I have been for years. You know how difficult it is working with water issues around here. It's all full of special interests, ideologues, emotion. And I said, I think the data would probably answer this question. Well, good luck trying to get the data. And I've tried to do it, and you look at my records and the response, I can't do it, and somebody needs to do it. Openness, transparency, and accountability for the source water is going to be what gets you to a water solution. And you heard a problem right off the bat here. The Water Resources Agency is talking acre feet, and then Monterey One Water comes in and says, well, we're talking gallons here. I mean, you just have to do conversions. Some of these agencies don't even have some use a calendar year. The Water Management District in Monterey Peninsula uses a water year. I mean, it's impossible to put this together and try to figure it out. So I think you should ask for that water supply audit. I also think that you should tell the agencies like Monterey One Water to overhaul all their data. No more bar charts without the data on it. We need to have numbers on everything so that you can do it. In my ideal world is all of these agencies that are involved, and there's probably about 10 in Caliam too, have them put in their data. You can put it in a chart and a map and show where everything is going and have it so accurate that the discrepancies between the numbers, you can say that's the leakage or loss. That's what you need around here. Let's demand that to be done for the people.
Thank you. Yes, you have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is John Tilley, and I'm asking to have a similar audit completed on the use of source waters by M1W. That is my concern more than the dollars, the actual source waters. The audit being discussed today clearly demonstrates M1W breaching the amended and restated water purchase agreement, that M1W has a weak control environment, and that M1W does not properly segregate assets. I fully expect those fatal flaws will also exist when an audit of M1W's use of source waters is completed. Paul Schuto, in his response to this audit, said the audit was a narrow interpretation of an ambiguous agreement. The amended and restated agreement is the bedrock of the supplemental EIR, allowing for the expansion of Pure Water Monterey. If M1W's interpretation of the agreement led to such an egregious financial error, a series of errors, it is critical for the Salinas Valley and the Monterey Peninsula to understand what errors M1W interpretation of water rights created. Remember, M1W and the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District have been highly motivated to make Pure Water Monterey look good. Finding 6 in the audit states, we do not believe M1W possesses appropriate controls for managing the agreement. I have no doubt this also applies to how M1W is going about collecting water for Pure Water Monterey. In the M1W response to the audit, they state that since they used the unapproved method of the accounting for an extended period of time without objection from the Water Resource Agency, it should not have been a problem. Would this attitude also apply to water sources? For years, the M1W and the Water District have spoken of Salinas water as this big pool of water they want to access. Finding 5 shows as Pure Water Monterey was ramping up, a greater amount of inappropriate funds moved from the Water Resource Agency to M1W. I fully expect a water audit would likewise show illegitimate taking of source waters from the Salinas Valley to make Pure Water Monterey look good. I am asking for a similar audit completed with quality and with quickness on the source waters used by M1W. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else in the chambers who would like to speak on this matter? Do we have anybody online? Nobody on the line, okay. Bring it back to the board then. I'm sorry, is a hand raised? Okay, yes.
Nancy Isaacson.
Yes, Ms. Isaacson, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I apologize, supervisors, I wasn't quick enough with raising my hand, but I want to thank you for the presentation by staff and for the comments made. And certainly the Water Coalition has supported the audit. We've also had previously have asked for an audit of the source waters as well. But in looking at the recommendations, it appears that the primary central recommendation is to be a relook at the agreements, the existing agreements. So my question centers on, does that open the whole door for the whole agreement? Will you be looking at specific areas? Because there's many different areas, original, amended, et cetera. And then I think in going forward and looking at the amending your agreements, that it would be important to engage with the stakeholders. We are the ones that are heavily involved, and it would be important to have our input as well. Thank you.
Thank you. No one else online? Okay. Nobody else in the chambers then? Then we will close public comment on this, bring it back to the board. I just, want to state is, I think everybody is in agreement here is that, there's a long history of these two agencies working together. We need to work together as we go down in the future. There's, very few issues as pressing as water. And we need to develop a process of transparency and accountability that works for all sides on this, as well as address in a timely fashion some of these unanswered questions as raised earlier about the $600,000. I just think it's, we need to move to a solution on this, and just wanted to throw those comments in, an amicable solution onto this, or everybody's moving together, because we just can't be divided. Want to turn the rest of the board for comments, directions. Anybody have anything? Which supervisor here?
Yeah, I want to make a comment and then talk about next steps here. One comment was just on some of these expenditures that I forgot to mention earlier. For example, on that question of outreach, the audit pointed out that costs escalated from about $28,000 to almost $800,000, right? That's got 28 times what was being spent. So when those things happen, when you have a partner, there should be conversations of anything that's going to be billed or charged, there has to be agreement before costs are passed on to an agency like the Water Resources. So there's a lot in here that we could spend all day on how we fix those. But I think for the question for maybe ARA or our county council is, I know we're in continued conversations, negotiations on some of these legal issues with M1W, but then I guess in terms of for the public to know, and I hear the concerns about the water audit. These were other concerns that are out there that have been out there for several years now. But in terms of next steps, here's an audit with numerous recommendations. What's the timeline to do the follow-up on implementation of the recommendations, on making changes in the agreement? And then how do we ensure down the road that everything is actually implemented as it should, rather than looking at this again in a year or two and find out that only half of the recommendations were actually put in place. So for me and for the public, it's like, what's that roadmap for us to fix all these issues that have been laid out in the audit?
Yeah, it's a great question, Supervisor. The agreement itself provides for, I'll describe it this way, but in essence, a 90-day remedy period. And so we'll be working in that time frame initially. I believe the action before you today does call for at least, quarterly updates, so it kind of fits that 90-day time frame. I would anticipate that all of these questions can't be resolved in 90 days, but we want to be able to demonstrate, meaningful progress along the way. We'll report as we go. We'll lay out next steps, but that's the initial increment, at least that the agreement points out to.
And what kind of resources or technical assistance will we have to ensure that they've been implemented? Because here we did an audit, yet an experts of CPAs to be able to really looking at and utilizing federal standards, national standards for audits. I'm not sure. I know we have our county auditor, but what else? What other help will we have to ensure that they've been implemented? Because I believe for those who did the audit for us, GPP, will they step away now, or will they come back to ensure that the changes they recommended were actually implemented?
Yeah, I'm going to unpack that into two separate questions. I do believe that there's a role for GPP going forward to help explain some of the work that they've done so that, we, the two agencies working together through our leadership group and through staff, can benefit from their insights and their expertise. And so I do see a short-term and rather narrow scope there for them going forward. But I think it's also critical with respect to the work that they've done, that they maintain their independence and their impartiality towards all of this. And so I don't see a big role in terms of resolving some of the other issues. And so I think your question overall makes a lot of sense. I don't have an answer for you standing here today, but I think it's a good question for us to contemplate and then be able to, come back and present you with a solution.
Yeah. Mr. Shudo, you'd like to respond?
Please.
As well?
Yeah, just to, I think, try to address the second part of the question of how do you make sure things are moving forward as identified. And we've already talked to agency finance staff about having an audit performed every year. So not to necessarily specific to the agreement, but a financial audit on the books for Water Resources Agency. And it's something that has not been done in the past to segment it out, but that's what we agreed to do coming this next year. And I think that would help address that concern.
Great. I appreciate it. And the only reason I say that, because in my past experience, when the audit was done at the state level, they would check back on, it was like 90 days, but then 6 months and a year. And by that year report, the state would expect most of those recommendations to be done. And if not, the entity needed to explain why the other recommendations hadn't been implemented. So there was the thorough follow through on all the recommendations. And so that's what there's a lot of investment of work here. I don't want us to only get halfway through and not finish and implement all the other remaining ones. Thank you.
Supervisor Lopez?
Yeah, I just want to wholeheartedly endorse the statements made earlier by Supervisor Alejo and thank the public for engaging on this issue, especially around the question of making sure that we continue to seek transparency. I think that has been the call the whole time. I may be called an instigator for having pushed that piece, but we're sitting here today with information in front of us because we've continued to call for this transparency. So as we stare down these particular facts, and that's what they are, we have to find a path forward. Our futures are inextricably linked. And as we look at what that looks like, we have to also recognize that since this agreement was struck in 2015 and we move forward, a lot has changed since 2015. A lot, especially in terms of state mandates, in terms of expectations of us as basins and how we will define balance and how we will accomplish that particular goal. And so as we look at this agreement, the agreement needs to change. And I think that is what we're all committed to on our end of this. And as we move forward, I think that's going to be painful for a lot of folks who've expected to have additional waters flow, to have additional money flow to agencies that are not going to see that any longer based on the reality of these expectations from the state. Tough conversations, very real conversations. And this, I think, is a starting block for those conversations to move forward. So as we start those, I just want to hit that we're here together saying they need to happen, but the pain still lies ahead for all of us in several different ways. Part of that is needing to put solutions out there, right? So as we seek those together, I'm asking everybody to continue to be at the table to the question that was raised by the coalition in their public comment about what role do we play as members of the public? You play every role. I'm hoping that as many points as we have along this trail together towards a solution, that we have openness to that dialogue, because I don't want to sit here a year from now, as Supervisor Alejo was talking about, and say, here's our plan, and then get everybody chiming in at that point saying, no, and we're going to end up in lawsuits from other angles. We've learned this lesson over the years that the more open we are to having input early on, the better the product is. The product we have before us failed, and I think that is quite clear. It failed in terms of transparency. It failed in terms of actual process and how it played out. So we need to do better. But as we do better, we have to be open to that input. I want to thank everybody who called for additional transparency, and specifically Mr. Dayton, around that question of data. As we move forward, that data needs to be open to the public in every form possible. I know that there's always challenges around, we're dealing with it on the GEM side, we're dealing with the groundwater side, we're having those conversations and how it's going to come forward. But on this end as well, we need to invest in that transparency in terms of systems that will allow us to clearly report data back to the public so that there is a new level of trust based on real figures, not bar graphs without numbers. That's what we can commit to, I think, as a board in terms of creating that transparency the public deserves around this very critical resource that does define so much of what we all seek to accomplish together, from housing to expansion of businesses. None of that happens without water. But as long as that is murky, nothing's going to really move forward because it leaves us open to litigation and potential issues. So I do appreciate this report coming forward. I do appreciate the recognition that there are issues that still need to be clarified and hashed out. But I think the big thing has been mentioned up here for me today is when we bring this back, it needs to be as unambiguous as possible. And I know that there's always things we don't foresee, including the creation of a groundwater sustainability bill that changed the entire world we live on within these government realms. But moving forward, knowing the facts we have today, having experienced this report, I hope we can agree that these are some of the things we're going to work on together moving forward, because inevitably we're going to do it together and we will move forward. So thank you.
Supervisor Adams?
Thank you. Thanks very much, Supervisor Lopez. I think you've wrapped up a lot there. One of the things that I think is going to be important is that we've all been looking at data and we've all been seeing some pretty alarming news. And we're going to have bad news for people, news that people, or information, data that people are not going to be terribly happy about. And I think that's where our role comes in, because it would be very helpful if we, as the leaders in our various districts, have the opportunity to work with those affected populations or businesses or industries or whatever it may be to help ensure that they see what it is that we're doing here. I think that's going to be a little bit of a sticky wicket for us. Or, as you said, murky, and there's nothing worse than murky water. So we've got to make sure that whatever it is that we do remain transparent, and that we do deal with the reality of the information that we're getting. So this part of it, this part of the agreement between Monterey County Water Resources Agency and Monterey One Water is one part of it, but it's a much bigger picture that I think we're all going to be having to address as we come up in the next number of months and years. And I just hope that we are able to take the appropriate leadership role that we have to ensure that the transparency is there, and that we do have a really braided approach to this, and that we're all helpful and all trying to come to the same end result, which is more water.
Final question. So this is before us today as the Board of Supervisors. And can you just restate we've got Monterey One Water Board, Water Resource Agency Board, so there'll be some additional presentations coming up. If you could just announce when those are going to be. And again, I'll just reiterate, I think we're here, we're looking to the future, want to make sure that we are engaged in this together. It's okay to have respectful disagreements about things as long as our end goal is how do we figure out the place where we come together and what does compromise look like, so that we can have a path to follow moving forward. Again, just want to thank you guys both for your leadership.
Yeah, so this presentation, something similar to it, will be reprised next Monday for the Water Resources Agency Board of Directors, and August 26th. Thank you.
Okay. Supervisor Alejo, do you want to add?
I was waiting for you to hear your comments.
Oh, okay. Well, I sort of commented to begin with a little bit.
Okay, only one last point I wanted to bring up, hopefully on the money that is owed, because I know that $1,110,117, if it was paid by the water resource, that's the money that our ratepayers paid. And so I know they're going to look at that very closely. They're going to expect that to be repaid, because otherwise their money is being used for the purposes that it wasn't intended for. So I just want to put that in perspective for those that are watching. We get that, and hopefully we could come to a just solution about repayment of that money owed per this audit.
So we need to give some direction, recommendations here from the board? Kind of looking about. Anybody has a,
What we were charged with, I believe, was just to,
we have a recommend, we can, provide direction here is one of the,
toward updating the discrepancies with the agreements.
So if we could I'll make a motion that we move forward with the direction outlined by staff to provide, to ask our team to continue engaging with Monterey One Water to resolve the audit findings and recommendations, to direct our staff to engage with Monterey One Water to examine other provisions of the amended and restated water recycling agreement between the parties that may require updating, and to provide a direction to our staff to report back to us at least quarterly on the progress of those discussions. I'll make that as a motion.
Can I ask for a friendly amendment? And I'll give you the second on that. That would be just to clearly call out that question about the reclamation fund and wanting that to be discussed, because it seemed like we were of two opinions on that.
As part of the discussion to find some resolution on that issue as well. Yeah.
Great. I'll second your motion.
Thank you.
first and second. Any other discussion on this? Go to a vote.
And do we have to accept this audit on record, that we accept this?
Probably is a good idea. We could,
That's part of the staff recommendation. I
Yes,
didn't
okay,
read it off,
perfect,
but yes,
perfect,
that is
thank you.
part of the staff.
I want to make sure that on the record that we've accepted that here today.
any other nuances? Okay. Let's put this to a vote then. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you for your presentations. We'll move on to item 22, which is receive report on the status of the Community Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. Cora, it's all yours. Excuse me, I should, that was we were in the Water Resources Agency, the Board of Supervisors, so let me take care of that first. I want to see if we have any readout from our closed session.
There's no reportable action from closed session.
With that, we'll adjourn the Monterey County Board of Supervisors, Water Resources Agency, and reconvene the Monterey County Board of Supervisors. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, let the record reflect all supervisors are present.
Thank you. And now I'll turn it back over to you, Cora.
Thank you, Chair. Pardon me while I move in over here, and we can go ahead and have our consultant, Hannah Cornfield with the Sense Inc., share their screen, and we can get started.
Or just let me know when you're ready.
All right, I am ready. So thank you all for making the time to come today. I'm very excited to present this item, which is an update on our Community Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, as we have a question for the board to consider. And Hannah, please go ahead and go to the next slide. So our quick agenda for this presentation is that we're going to have an update on both the Community Climate Action Plan that I'll refer to as the CAP, and also the Municipal Climate Action Plan, or the MCAP. So we'll have that 2030 status updates. We'll move into a discussion on CEQA qualified CAPs before discussing the CAP and MCAP 2030 strategies that we have so far, and proceeding with staff recommendation. And not on this agenda is one item that I wanted to call to the board's attention as part of the staff report, which is to augment and extend the agreement with Instant Environmental to accomplish the scope of work identified in option 1 that we will be discussing in this presentation. This lapsed in the turnover before our last sustainability program manager left, and before I was able to assume that position and augment that contract. All right, Hannah, we can go to the next slide. So we'll have our conversation now on the CAP and MCAP 2030 status updates. Next slide, please. And one of the things that we just wanted to touch on briefly was our purpose for this CAP and MCAP, and that is the General Plan Policy OS-10.11 that calls for the development of the CAP, and that the previous MCAP needs to be evaluated and updated because it has lapsed from 2020. Next slide, please. So our progress to date is that we have had our 2019 greenhouse gas inventory as well as our carbon stock, and our emissions forecast through 2045, the climate vulnerability assessment, 2 public workshops with over 160 participants, 3 presentations to the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee, 3 separate focus group meetings, 9 sector working group meetings, and we have our online platforms on Conveo and a feedback platform as well. Right now, we are in progress in our climate adaptation strategies as well as our greenhouse gas reduction strategies. We're also conducting separate outreach with community-based organizations, and we are here today to discuss our CEQA compliance determination. Upcoming, we have some more community engagement activities as well as the drafting of both the CAP and the MCAP. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of our recent community engagement that the Sustainability Program has been conducting. Since we came to the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee at the end of February of this year, one of the main focuses that the committee had was to be open and transparent about our process and to really focus on community engagement. So we started that off with these meetings that I have been holding with different community-based organizations, and these organizations were squished a little bit to fit on the slide, but I'm happy to provide a full accounting of those organizations if the board requests. A couple that I will call out are Mujeres en Acción, CCA, Regeneración, and the Monterey Bay Area Climate Justice Collaborative. There's a lot of room for continued engagement on this plan. We're very fortunate to have engaged stakeholders like Ecology Action, Landwatch, and the Farm Bureau, who will continue to provide feedback, I'm sure, and I look forward to engaging with more stakeholders in the future. Next slide, please. So this graphic shows where we are in the development of the Climate Action Plan. And if the board elects to pursue option 1, then this is the timeline that we can be expecting. And this will include 2 large community meetings. One is a community workshop in October of 2024, as well as a sector working group meeting in October 2024. And those will both be virtual with in-person options to attend. Following those meetings, we'll proceed to the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee, as well as the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors for final adoption in the late spring of 2025, and then ongoing implementation into the summer of 2025. Next slide, please. And one more, Hannah. So our task today is to determine the option that would best work for the county's needs. The option that has been identified is option 1, the non-qualified cap, as we're calling it, with separate thresholds of significance, or option 2, which is a CEQA qualified cap. Staff does recommend option 1 with the non-qualified option with separate thresholds of significance for separate permitting benefits. And I will pass this over to Hannah Cornfield to discuss further.
Thanks, Cora. Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. My name is Hannah Kornfeld. I'm with the consulting firm Ascent Environmental. We've been retained for helping the county with this project. We started this in 2021 and have been working hard in the background to figure out what is the best approach for the county moving forward. And so we'll just walk through kind of what those 2 options are that are included in the agenda packet. And starting with this question of what is a CEQA qualified cap. And I do want to just note that there's a lot of acronyms, so please let me know if you have any questions. But for our purposes, a CAP, Climate Action Plan, is the same thing as the Community Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. It's intending to do the same things. So that CCAP and this CAP are virtually the same for purposes of this conversation. So a CEQA qualified climate action plan is essentially a climate action plan that meets the requirements of this specific section within the CEQA guidelines, which is 15183.5. That also includes the certification of a CEQA document. So unlike a policy document cap, which would be akin to option 1, under this option, which would be option 2, a CEQA qualified cap would allow future development projects to take advantage of the CEQA streamlining provisions by demonstrating consistency with the adopted climate action plan. So that is if the project is consistent with the plan elements, such as the plan to reduce greenhouse gases, as well as the county's adopted general plan and the land use designations within it. The plan the development would have to demonstrate that all applicable measures within the climate action plan are incorporated as either project design features or as mitigation measures for them to, say that they are consistent with the climate action plan and therefore do not need further analysis for the greenhouse gas reduction part of the CEQA document that they need to prepare. I do want to note that the benefits of this tiering provision under CEQA only pertain to the greenhouse gas analysis. It does not streamline all the other resource areas of CEQA, like transportation and biological resources. So for many agencies, including having a CEQA qualified cap, can be a strong incentive to support future development. And again, as part of this option, the climate action plan would be considered a project under CEQA and would therefore have to undergo environmental review. The specific document that would be appropriate is not necessarily an EIR. We would have to determine that if the board were interested in that option. So there are jurisdictions along the Central Coast that have adopted CEQA qualified climate action plans, or just climate action plans and that are not CEQA qualified. We typically see these more often with cities that are projecting higher amounts of growth because the growth indicates that there's going to be more development in the future that might benefit from the streamlining provisions from a qualified plan. You'll note that there are a lot of counties in the region that have adopted climate action plans. The majority of those are not qualified. That's typically because unincorporated counties are not experiencing significant amounts of growth and development, and therefore the provisions of that CEQA streamlining benefit are not favorable for the jurisdictions. And then we'll just note there are several in progress within the region, within the county, and we don't yet know if those are going to be CEQA qualified or not. So sticking with this CEQA qualified cap option, which is option number 2, there's a variety of pros and cons for this option. Some of the benefits of selecting this option, it would provide the county with an adopted plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There's a variety of co-benefits like improved air quality, biodiversity, community resilience that could be realized. It will help position the county for future grant funding opportunities. Again, it provides that CEQA tiering streamlining benefit, which is a legally defensible project level analysis approach that's been upheld numerous times in court decisions. It also provides a consistent approach to project level analysis and mitigation by having all of the measures that are included in the climate action plan out there for developers to see. It's leveling the playing field a bit so that they can all be responsible for implementing anything that is applicable to their project type. This will allow also compliance with both the California Air Resources Board and the California Office of Planning and Research recommendations. There's currently limited guidance from the Air District in terms of what new development should do. So this could potentially fill some of that gap. However, there are a series of considerations for option 2. It does introduce a litigation risk due to having a CEQA process. Notably, it will extend the timeline for adopting the cap. The timeline that Cora showed was using option 1 by having a full CEQA process that add months to a year for all of this to be kind of worked out and figured out. And that means that it's a really short timeline to start implementing the actions that are included in the cap to meet a 2030 reduction target. So there will be a lot of work to be done in less than 5 years, and that could pose a lot of challenges from the staffing constraints and budgetary perspective. Additionally, the CEQA qualified cap option may not offer streamlining benefits for the long term. It would be for whatever year we can demonstrate that we can close the emissions gap. We anticipate that could be 2030, but because again, the county is low growth, it would require a lot more from new development, and we don't expect a future date to be really considered achievable or feasible. Additionally, for the CEQA qualified cap option, there's less flexibility in how the county meets its greenhouse gas reduction targets. There will be a significant reliance on building energy strategies because it's one of the areas that the county would have the most jurisdiction and regulatory authority. But again, that would require a lot of probably unfavorable requirements for new development, but also notably for existing development, because there is not a large share of new development coming for the unincorporated areas of the county. The existing development would have to bear the brunt of a lot of the work. If we look at option 1, which is the staff recommendation, which is a non-qualified climate action plan, it provides a lot of the same benefits that option 2 has. It still is an adopted plan, which is aiming to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It still achieves similar co-benefits, also positions the county for future grant funding opportunities. This would be a faster and cheaper option. We anticipate this could be several months, if not more, in terms of the difference between the two to getting to an adoption stage. And we think that this is a lot more reflective of the community feedback. As Cora noted, there's been a lot of stakeholder engagement throughout this process. There's been a strong interest in accounting for carbon sequestration on agricultural and natural lands. So a plan that is not burdened by the CEQA qualification could really reflect more of the community's values and continue that buy-in that can move into the implementation phase. The other thing to point out about option 1 is there is still an option where we provide new development with guidance, even if it is not through a qualified climate action plan. It could be through greenhouse gas thresholds that can be used in CEQA documents. So this would provide that guidance for discretionary development. It would stay in line with where the county needs to be in terms of reducing emissions, and kind of makes up that gap that's currently exists because MBARD has not put out guidance on how new development should address greenhouse gas emissions. So we see this as kind of meeting both the benefits that are afforded by the CEQA qualified cap in terms of benefits for new development, but also reflective of what's possible in Monterey County, given that it's a slow growth community. Some of the considerations for option 1 is that it might limit some of the prescriptiveness of the policies that are included. That could be favorable or unfavorable, I think, depending on how you look at it. It also wouldn't provide that direct streamlining or tiering benefit for discretionary projects subject to CEQA. Digging a little bit more into this kind of county-specific thresholds of significant part of option 1. I've walked through most of these, but it allows for more flexibility for development to determine how they want to reduce their emissions. These would potentially be numeric thresholds. They could be a variety of metrics that we would work with county staff to determine what would be the most helpful. But there would not be that same prescriptive requirements of you have to do every single thing applicable in the climate action plan. It would be you need to reduce emissions to a specific amount. How you do it is up to you. And so this would also provide added benefits beyond the 2030 timeframe. So we can, because we have, as part of this process, set reduction targets for all the way out to 2045. we can develop thresholds for multiple operational years. So it provides that CEQA benefit longer than option 2 does. This will not add any time to the entire process. This will happen in parallel to developing the CAP and will be brought to the board with the CAP during the adoption process. The considerations for this, of course, is that every development could choose to have different mitigation. And so again, depending on how you look at it, that could be beneficial or it could be challenging because development does not have, here are all the things you need to do. It's a bit of a choose your own adventure. Some of the other considerations is that, you know, there could be lead agencies. If the County of Monterey were not a lead agency, that could set thresholds on a project by project basis or adopt thresholds to be consistently applied to all projects. And importantly, thresholds that are established for general use by a lead agency have to follow these 3 specific things. So it has to be adopted by ordinance, resolution, rule, or regulation. It must be subject to public review, and it must be supported by substantial evidence. All of these things are included in the scope of work and the schedule that's been provided. I'm going to pass it back to Cora to talk a little bit about how we kind of find ourselves in these 2 pathways based on this strategy analysis that we've done.
Thank you, Hannah. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. And the discussion that we're going to have now about these greenhouse gas reduction measures, these correspond to the attachment that you've seen in the staff report that is an initial memo from Ascend detailing potential strategies for greenhouse gas reduction. These were the result of the sector working groups that were held in the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee, as well as the community working groups. So these were initial strategies that were identified with their benchmarks of how we're going to monitor and implement these strategies that were deemed acceptable to the stakeholders at that time, as well as the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee. And what we'll see as we get into this is that these strategies alone fall significantly short of our goals for our climate action plan, and we will be needing to increase our greenhouse gas reductions measures in some capacity, and that will be the topic of future meetings. And while I have been doing the outreach over the last few months, this has really been the focus of a lot of that, and bringing these large global issues, greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere, to our community level and discussing what that looks like as far as buildings and transportation and how that can affect indoor air quality and even save money for households on transportation. And really focusing on that co-benefits, I have found to be an encouraging way for our community to engage with this project, and I think we're going to see a lot more engagement along those lines. So as we move on to the next slide, you will see that these 6 categories that we have in front of us mostly focus on building energy and on-road transportation. This is because this memo focused on what the county had the most control over, with the intent of going for a qualified cap before we reach this decision. So now I'm going to pass it back to Hannah, who will walk through the different categories that we're looking at in the focus area, as well as the performance indicator and the justification for these strategies and the reasoning that went into them.
Great, thanks, Cora. So I know that I don't want to read all of these verbatim. These are all in your agenda packets, but essentially we looked at, again, as Cora said, a few different focus areas, building energy being one of the main ones. We looked at both residential and non-residential buildings, as well as the electricity that's supplied, and tried to set performance standards for the year. These are all specific to 2030. We looked out to 2045 to think about what might be feasible for the unincorporated county. And so that justification is really just kind of a starting point for conversation. You know, I think the important thing to note is that when we looked at all of these things collectively, again, it did not come close to meeting the county's 2030 target. And so this would, you know, mean we would have to ramp up the electrification of existing buildings to in the neighborhood of 35% by 2030 to meet the target. And right now we were expecting somewhere in the ballpark of 5%. So would have to really turn up the dials here in terms of what these performance indicators are. The other large piece of the pie, the largest, is on-road transportation. So we looked at how to reduce annual passenger vehicle miles traveled, switching over to more electric vehicles, and making sure that those electric vehicles are being supplied with carbon-free electricity. So all of these things, increasing the sheer volume of the percent of the fleet that is light duty, that is electric vehicles, and reducing VMT through measures like active transportation, improvements, and other policies that are consistent with AMBAG's 2045 MTP SES. All of these, again, did not get us to the target collectively. We looked at off-road vehicles and equipment. This is a much smaller piece of the pie, but still we're looking at all of the potential ways that we can reduce emissions in a comprehensive way. So looking at construction equipment, landscaping equipment, recreational boats. We looked at solid waste and water, thinking about how much organic waste is being diverted from landfills. Reducing water consumption as that generates emissions through electricity, increasing the use of recycled water in irrigation, as well as looking at agricultural equipment and trying to see if there's a path forward to turning over the fleet to cleaner options, be it Tier 4 final rated engines, if they are diesel engines, or electrifying where possible. And so all of this, again, collectively is still 20% short of the county's target. So ideally, the gap here between, the top of the wedged colors and the dotted line would be met from all sectors, but considering the challenges associated with reducing VMT and reducing agricultural emissions from livestock, it's really the building energy sector where the county would, again, have the most authority and jurisdiction to regulate. So that's kind of where we landed with the community-wide emissions gap analysis, and what really is bringing us to having these two options on the table of, do we want to really start turning up the dial in terms of how much the county is going to regulate and drive decarbonization with a very short time frame, versus understanding that this is going to take time and making a plan that we think will kind of stand the test of time a little bit and provide more flexibility and really be reflective of what we're hearing from the community.
And Hannah, if you could actually go back to the last slide for a moment. And then one point I just want to illustrate is, as we are 20% short of that 2030 goal of a 40% reduction and 61% short of that target for an 80% reduction, what this non-qualified option allows us to do is tweak the dials on these greenhouse gas reduction measures in a way that best fits the county's needs. So for Hannah's example of the existing building electrification, so to meet this target only with the qualified option of having to increase that from 5% of existing buildings being electrified to 35% is really aggressive and is not seen as favorable from what we've seen from our work with community members, as well as the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee. But there is probably a number in between 5 and 35% that is works that does fit for the county's needs. And as we discuss these options with community members and bring up the rates of childhood asthma in California, which is about 21% of all childhood cases of asthma diagnosis are related to gas appliances in the home. So when you present those options to community members, I have found that there's a lot of interest in adopting these measures. So there's a balance that we are trying to fit with this plan, and the focus that I want to carry on with the program over the next few months is really focus on quality over a qualified plan as we address these targets. Next slide, please, Hannah. And we can go through this quickly with the MCAP, so our Municipal Climate Action Plan as well. And Hannah, if you can just flip through the next couple of slides for me slowly. So the real focus area that we have on our Municipal Climate Action Plan focuses on our buildings and electric supply. And what we have at the county with our Municipal Climate Action Plan is an opportunity to lead the way. And for things like our building sector, what will develop as we achieve our municipal climate action plans is we will demonstrate that the markets locally for these technologies exist and that there is a workforce to accomplish some of these goals. And we will also be continuing to participate in our 3CE Central Coast Community Energy aggregate as well, so that we can move towards 100% renewable energy locally. Our electric vehicle plan is part of this. This is something that I'm coordinating with Public Works Facilities Parks on, and there is opportunity to reduce our VMT from our employee commutes by encouraging other forms of transportation, either carpooling, active or public transportation, as well as converting to electric vehicles. Next slide, please. And this covers our waste from our Municipal Climate Action Plan. So we are trying to be consistent with our SB 1383 guidelines as part of this, and that will accomplish the majority of our waste reductions for our Climate Action Plan in the municipal level. Next slide. And this is where our initial greenhouse gas reductions end up for the municipal side of things. We are 14% short of our 2030 goal for a 40% reduction, as well as 69% short of our goal for our 80% reduction. And as we can see, a majority of this comes from our employee commutes and our buildings and facilities. So as we develop a decarbonization plan for our facilities, that will accomplish a lot of this work, as well as finding alternatives for our staff and their commutes. Next slide, please. So we also have a few development scenarios with these cap options. So if the board requests to go through those to see what a proposed development would have to go through, either through option 1 or option 2, we can take the time to do that. I know that we are a bit past schedule right now, so I'm going to table that unless the board requests it. Next slide. So that brings us back to our recommendation, and here we are to determine the option that best fits the county's needs, and staff does recommend option 1, the non-qualified cap with separate thresholds of significance. And we have this recommendation because of the greater flexibility to create the greenhouse gas strategies that fits the county needs, the quicker adoption timeline, decreased risk of litigation, reduced costs, and comparable benefits for discretionary projects that come from those thresholds of significance. And this does fit with the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee's recommendation on February 29th of this year. So next slide, please. With that, I will pass that back to the board and public for comments and questions.
Anybody on the board with a question or comment at this point? Okay, let me take it out to the public first then. Please come forward. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Clancy. I live here in Salinas, and I chair the Monterey County chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. The science has been completely and thoroughly settled for many years on the following 3 points. 1, over the past 125 years, the Earth has been warming and the climate has been changing at alarming rates. 2, global warming and the resulting global climate change over the past 125 years have been driven almost exclusively by the Earth's greenhouse effect and the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere caused by human activities, mainly the burning of fossil fuels. 3, without dramatic reduction in the emission of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, the Earth will continue to warm and the climate will continue to change to the detriment of humankind. Certainly, we are no strangers to the impact of climate change here in Monterey County. We are experiencing growing hydroclimate whiplash with a steadily worsening long-term drought punctuated occasionally by increasingly severe and damaging short-term atmospheric river events, which do little to alleviate the worsening long-term drought. And like other coastal counties in California, Monterey County is facing huge future costs required to deal with the effects of sea level rise. The U.S. is the world's largest per capita emitter of greenhouse gases, the second largest total emitter of greenhouse gases, second only to the world's most populous country, China, and the world's largest legacy emitter of greenhouse gases. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, no other country has emitted more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere than the United States. So clearly, the U.S. needs to play a significant role in dealing with the climate crisis, which implies that California and Monterey County have significant roles to play as well. So on behalf of the 200-plus members of the Monterey County chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, I urge you to approve and fully implement the Community Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. And I also ask that you provide additional staffing and resources for the county's sustainability program to more fully address the full range of climate challenges we are faced with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chris Bunn. I'm here on behalf of Monterey County Farm Bureau, and we are 100% opposed to how this is proceeding. We ask you to tap the brakes a bit on this. We've had very little interaction ourselves during this process. I realize that there has been some interaction with the Ag Advisory Committee, but that committee, there's people in that committee that have nothing to do with production ag, and they do not speak for the farming community. So we would like to be involved in this process. We've got a lot to say, and we've got a lot at stake. I mean, looking at some of those options, you're talking about shifting diesel engines that are used in ag in various ways, whether it's line trucks or tractors or pumps, boosters, shift that over to electric. That's impossible. That's categorically impossible. The technology doesn't exist. This is something we talk about a lot in great detail in Farm Bureau meetings. So please tap the brakes and please get the ag community involved in this process properly. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the chambers with a comment? Do we have anybody online?
Mary Williams.
Yes, Ms. Williams, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Mary Williams, and I'm a resident of Pebble Beach and the co-chair of the Monterey Bay chapter of the Climate Reality Project. This chapter was formed in May of 2023, and we've gained the support of over 100 members who are passionate about helping to educate our community on the facts of climate change and to actively participate in solutions that are available to us now to avert the worst impacts. I'd like to thank the board for taking up this item and moving forward on developing the Community Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. And in support of this, I ask the board to approve the non-CEQA approach for the CAP as per staff recommendations and contractor support for the plan, including community outreach and engagement activities. I also urge the board to approve the solar projects and select the contracting process that will guarantee the county can get a project approved by the interconnection agreement deadline. Thank you very much.
Brooke Bueno.
You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. I have a comment to agenda item 22B and 22D. My name is Brooke Bueno. I'm a longtime Monterey County resident and SAGE board member. Environmental policy impacts many areas of our economy and is an important topic that should be addressed. However, it is inappropriate to move forward with this plan in this fashion. Good policy should not be rushed, and in this non-CEQA qualified plan was represented as a more flexible way to rely more heavily on partnerships within our agricultural community. The county's preference for achieving emissions reductions in the ag community is not reflected in your community outreach, and the ag community has not been reached out to regarding permanent leadership before moving forward. I urge you to take this into consideration and to consider a CEQA certified CAP where strategies published need to undergo proper analysis, including being based on substantial evidence with available data. Additionally, not taking the time to certify eliminates the streamlining effect, which down the line will result in evaluations being done on a project by project basis, which is costly and time consuming. In regards to 22D, the amendment number 2 agreement, there seems to be some confusion that needs to be addressed under activity 3, CEQA compliance task 3.2, developing CEQA thresholds. Ascent would be working with the county to develop and adopt CEQA thresholds of significance for GHGs. Under CEQA, the terminology used to determine if CEQA applies and thus an environmental impact report needs to be done is to determine whether implementing a project will result in any significant adverse impact on the environment, either individually or cumulatively. Whereas in the contract with Ascent, the terminology used is determining whether the contribution of a project's GHG emissions to climate change would be cumulatively considerable. Cumulatively considerable is broader than significantly adverse on the environment and not defined by precedent. The terminology was also changed from adversely affecting the environment to contributing to climate change. The threshold under CEQA is against the environment, not climate change. Both of these changes are concerning and not following CEQA, regardless if certified or not. Thank you for your consideration.
David Prina.
Yes, you have 2 minutes. I didn't catch the name.
David Prina. He's unmuted. David Prina.
Do we have anybody else?
Val Gano.
Hi, thank you. I also sent a letter, but I'll just say some things quickly. I'm also a Monterey County resident, Carmel Valley, and graduate master's degree in sustainability. I think that we really need to have a CEQA certified plan. I think it gives validity to the county. I think if it streamlines processes for the future, then that is something very important to think about. We may have slow growth, but we have high need of housing. So I think we need to anticipate that those things may change. We also, there's no reason that we shouldn't already be starting with this work, the hard work that needs to be done while the plan is being adopted. There are so many avenues that we can be implementing reductions across our county. There's so many opportunities for the county to take advantage to, be developing large solar agrivoltaic projects that earn the county money to then do the sustainable communities, designing and building of sustainable communities that needs to be done. It is true. We have to turn up the dials. The goal of electrifying residential and commercial buildings by 35%, I would say that is not even enough, but we can do it. Germany has done it in just a few years. If you look at Santa Barbara's plan, they are CEQA certified and they're actually superseding the goals of the state and they're on target to meet their goals earlier. So there is no reason that Monterey County cannot do it. We just need to have just a little bit of money funneled in to organize and hire the team, the umbrella team at the county that works together with all the different municipalities in order to, create a community that's focused on reaching these goals.
Thank you for your comments.
Reverend Andrew Baer.
Yes, you have 2 minutes.
Yes. Thank you, supervisors. My name is Andrew Baer, and I work in this county as a healthcare chaplain and also a member of the Climate Reality Project Monterey Bay chapter. And I'm calling in as a concerned citizen. Climate change is not something that's going to happen in the future. Climate change is here. The impacts are happening and they're growing. And we're right now passing the 1.5 Celsius threshold of warming over pre-industrial temperatures, which is a threshold that scientists have told us will lead to, if we pass, things are going to get just increasingly dire. So no place is safe, including Monterey County. And as a healthcare worker, I see what happens when we ignore problems in the lives of people that I take care of and visit every day. It's always best to take care of problems when they're smaller than wait until they become big problems. It's 2024. I don't think at all that this is a rushed process. We've known about climate change for how many decades now? And I applaud the county for taking this up. I think it's extremely important that we play our part to do our share of the work to protect the environment that we all know and love here in Monterey County. I'm encouraging the board and the supervisors to approve option 1, the non-CEQA approach, to make sure that the resources are given to CORA to meet the ambitious goals that we need to accomplish. And just know that myself and many here in the community are here to support you as you take this important action.
Thank you for your comments.
Norm Groot.
Mr. Groot, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Norm Groot for Farm Bureau Monterey, and I want to echo prior comments by Mr. Bunn that this process needs to be paused because ag has not been engaged in this process for the last year. There's been a lot of outreach, but none of it has been to the agricultural sector, which is our largest economic sector, and we need to be respectful of what is happening in that economy. We have a lot to offer in agriculture related to sequestration, and we need to find out how we can offer that through this plan by engaging the agricultural sector in this process. We also strongly believe that this needs to be a CEQA qualified document and process that allows full and complete review of the implications and impacts that this will have not only on our environment and hopefully improving our environment, but also on our economy. The economic impacts have to be weighed in with this to make sure that we do not destroy our economy or our largest economic sector. So again, we ask for a pause in this so that we can engage fully with the agricultural community and offer up some successful options and things that are already in place that we can work on and build on together. Thank you.
Ben Oakley.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ben Oakley with the Western States Petroleum Association. You know, as I was reviewing the materials last night, I noticed that buried deep in the amended professional services agreement is the directive that the Climate Action Plan will be a valuable resource to begin advancement towards structural equity in Monterey County. Quoting from the proposal, an approach based on structural equity examines whether planning decisions to achieve climate resilience also eliminate poverty and create workforce development opportunities, among other goals. We strongly agree and would like to point out that you can't bring people out of poverty and create job opportunities by making energy way more expensive for everyone. So however the county proceeds in developing the Climate Action Plan, energy affordability should be prioritized because protecting the everyday needs of people should be at the heart of energy and climate efforts. Rising costs for electricity, fuels, food, and housing don't have to be a byproduct of energy and climate policy choices. However, these impacts are felt in our households, our businesses, and communities every day. We all want to protect our climate, but the solutions must be fair and accessible to everyone, not just those who can afford them. We encourage you to ensure that energy affordability is a key feature of the Community Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. Thank you.
Walt Duflock.
Hi, folks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Hi, it's Walt Duflock. My ranch is in South Monterey County in San Ardo, and I want to just echo Norm Groot and Chris Bunn's comments with a little bit of amplification. I think we see a lot of bullet points in those slides about electrification of agriculture. And my day job at Western Growers is SVP of Innovation. I see virtually all of the electric vehicles from the truck side to the tractor side to the large capital equipment side. And I think there's two glaring weaknesses in the plan. First of all, there's very few trucks to buy. Commercially, you can buy Rivian, you can buy Cybertruck, and neither one of those will function like an F-150 or Toyota Tundra today. So until we get those out at scale, I think we should push pause, as Chris mentioned, on some of these number targets till we can get real about some of them. And in terms of the tractors, we're way behind that. So thinking about your average 5 Series Deere tractor, we are years to decades away from having that in a commercially viable position. And the bigger question for me is, how fast can California get the grid upgraded to support all that? Because if we're going to electrify all of it, you're going to have some outages and some electrical problems. With the current grid we have, we'll need a lot of investment to get it right. So again, we're asking you to push pause, reconsider, engage with agriculture. We're here. You know where to find Norm and myself and Chris, and we're happy to chat. Thank you.
Julie?
Hi there. My name is Reverend Julianne Porras Center. I'm the executive director and organizing pastor of a community center in Watsonville. And I would just like to lend my support to the climate action plan that Cora and her team have put together. I've personally witnessed how they reached out to community members, to faith leaders, to farm workers whose voices are too often ignored, and that they've considered things like economic viability, that they've considered things like cutting costs for community members and for those who are struggling. So I just want to lend my support to the climate action plan to improve the quality of life, because here in Watsonville and in Pajaro, our neighboring community, and those who move between them, so many were affected by climate change in the Pajaro floods. So many will continue to be, and unless we have a solid plan of both adaptation and mitigation, we're not going to get to any of those targets. We're not going to solve it unless we prioritize it. And so I really appreciate the prioritization and the way in which they have had an incredibly democratic approach, and would just love to see policies such as electrification programs for cooking classes or infrastructure to continue to develop to make this a greener and cleaner community that does take into account all voices. And I think Cora has done a wonderful job in doing that. So thank you so much.
And lastly, David Prina.
Hi, you able to hear me this time?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thank you. My name is David Prina. I'm a resident of Prunedale. And I just wanted to urge the board to move forward with the non-CEQA version of the CAP. I think as we've heard today, there are some folks who feel they have not been included in this process. And I think that's actually a feather in the cap of the non-CEQA approach, because it allows further flexibility. It also allows stakeholders who maybe are just learning about the process to get involved later on. And while the county continues to move forward with those things that have had significant community engagement, so they can move forward with those parts instead of waiting until everything is settled and then moving forward. I think getting ahead of, or taking climate, putting this on the agenda now is really important, moving ahead with this so that the county can begin implementation on the low-hanging fruit items that I think there's broad agreement on would be best. I think it's also important for the county to move forward on this so that their staff, especially the state sustainability staff, can get working on implementation instead of spending additional time on documentation. And Cora has shown herself to be very capable professional and very good at cultivating community ties. So I have no doubt that in the future, when the ag community is engaged even more, they'll be impressed with what she's capable of doing. So please move forward with the non-CEQA qualified plan. Thank you.
With that, we'll close public comment, bring it back here for the board for input, direction, Supervisor Adams and Supervisor Lopez.
And Chair, if you would like, I can also address some of these comments that were brought up as well.
Why don't we do that first, and go ahead, Cora. Thank you for
Of course.
Engineer
Thank you for
voice.
that time. So the first thing that came up was some staffing issues that the program is going through. And I just wanted to let the public know that I am working with management in the county administrative office for an allocation on loan process. So we should be getting another staff member here soon to help me advance these projects along. Another thing is that we will be losing our temporary secretary, Monica, who has done excellent work for us so far. So we brought her up to speed. We're able to get more of this engagement out there, and we'll be losing her. So hopefully, as we fill these permanent positions, we can have a little bit more bandwidth for this engagement. Another thing is that in the scope of this option 1 and the amendments that we have before the board today, there is a financing strategy for the short-term actions required for this option, and that does include looking at the sustainability program and potentially augmenting staff. And one of the things that we can really look at as we develop this plan is to have staff focus on specific issues. And I think agriculture and our natural and working lands is a great area that we could have a dedicated position to focus on engaging that community. And speaking of agricultural engagement, one of the things that came up over and over again as we were doing our community sectors and our sector working groups was the need to give ag credit for the good work that they are doing. And this does include the sequestration benefits of the carbon soil work that is in effect and the care that our agriculture community is putting into the work that they do, because climate change is not good for agriculture, and we know that they know that. And moving forward with option 1, the non-CEQA plan, allows us to better account for that sequestration benefit, as well as provide programming for bringing more carbon markets and carbon soil farming to Monterey County. And another point with tapping the brakes on this one, our last action on this was in February, so I'm not sure how much more we can tap the brakes on this. But the schedule that we have provided for with adoption expected in early spring of 2025, this does account for staff to wrap up some of the other projects that I will be presenting on slightly after this. And we will have more bandwidth to focus on this plan and the engagement going forward. And this schedule allows us the time to get this right, working with all of our stakeholders, including the agricultural community, and I'm looking forward to reaching out to them very soon. The other thing is that even though this is not a CEQA qualified plan, the measures are still based off of substantial evidence. And I think I will have Hannah speak to that a little bit more, as well as to the streamlining benefit of the non-CEQA qualified plan. This does relate directly to the greenhouse gas analysis that developments would have to do. So it is not the entire CEQA process that is streamlined, it's just that one component. And we also have Robert Breyer with County Council on the line, who is very familiar with that process to answer any questions there. But Hannah, I'll turn it over to you for now.
Sure, Cora, and I'll try to keep this brief, but I think there's a bit of a misconception with what a CEQA qualified plan does and does not do. The county can have a strong policy document that has very comparable, if not identical, measures to what is in a CEQA qualified plan. The difference is really in that the mechanism that kind of requires the county to implement and monitor and keep up with the plan in the same way. I think that there was also a misconception about a CEQA qualified plan would mean that an economic analysis would be done in addition to an environmental analysis. And I just want to point out that there is no economic resource area under CEQA. So the plan would not be evaluated because of a CEQA process for the potential benefits or harms to the local economy. I think that's as far as I need to take it now, and I'm happy to answer any further questions on that.
Thank you. And then the last point that I have is for our EVs and the points that were brought up around those electric vehicles. So we're very aware that right now the supply of electric vehicles is very constrained. That technology is advancing rapidly. And one of the things that we're dealing with here with our municipal climate action plan is the advanced clean fleets regulations. And one of the provisions of that is actually a one-to-one method. So when we have a use case like we have where one of our trucks needs to haul a 10,000-pound trailer from Toro Park down to Lake Nacimiento. That's not something that can be done with any of the electric vehicles on the market and still have enough range to perform activities when the truck gets there. So how this one-to-one ratio would work is that Public Works and Parks would then have a dedicated electric vehicle truck to accomplish the tasks that it can accomplish around the parks. And then they would also be able to purchase one vehicle that is capable of having that heavy load. So similar regulations will apply as we try and tackle these areas where the technology just isn't feasible. If the tractor doesn't work out in the fields because it's not all electric in the way we want it to be, no one's saying that we need to stop plowing that field. So as we develop these solutions and greenhouse gas reduction measures with our stakeholders, we do want to keep in mind feasibility and ways to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions around what is possible and beneficial for our community. And those are all my comments. I'll pass that back to the chair and the board.
Thank you. Supervisor Adams and Lopez.
Thank you. It's a quick question for you, Cora, but there were so many comments from the representatives of the ag industry indicating that they didn't know anything about this and they had not been contacted. Can you just give me an overview of how you did outreach and if there was an attempt to reach out to the ag industry?
Yes. So how we structured our outreach has been through programming brought by the Monterey Bay Area Climate Justice Collaborative, as well as stakeholders that have reached out. And there was also a series that the health department was leading on developing community-based organizations and integrating our advocacy and structural equity into these programming. So that allowed us to connect directly with some community-based organizations. And moving forward, we are looking at engaging more with the agricultural community. Again, I am only one person at this time, and I am looking forward to having those conversations because Norm Grootz and other members of the Farm Bureau were very plugged in with the other study that was done recently on natural and working lands led by AMBAG. So I was able to participate in those meetings with them, and there's a lot of good advice and really thoughtful leadership that our ag community is doing. And we're looking forward to reaching out to them very soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, my comments were in the same vein. I think I'm just really worried that the reason the last attempt at this and iteration failed was because we didn't engage directly with ag. And we ended up hearing directly from Monterey County cattlewomen and men who we haven't heard from today, but we're extremely active through Deb Dotson, who I know is always been willing to bring solutions, right, as we try to get the greenhouse gas emission profiles all built out. And so sitting here today, hearing from industry that they haven't been contacted is a huge concern for me, given where we are and the fact that that was the key lesson out of the last iteration under Ashley's leadership. I get that you're one person, but if we had between February and today, I just hope or wish that that would have been a larger focus given that last experience. So yeah, I'm really concerned that they have not been engaged before bringing it to us for this question, right, about how we proceed forward, given the standard. Now, the report was also a little concerning about going all electric. This board's already opined once on that question about homes going all electric. To me, it feels right now very pie in the sky, given several factors. Up here on the dais, I think I'm the only person who drives an electric vehicle. And since 2013, that's been true. I'm an early adopter, right? My family is currently sitting on a $500,000 project, sitting on a roof that was completed last October that we cannot turn on an electric project. We're not there. And I get that we're saying, oh, but if it comes and we're there, well, it's this layer, this feeling of, we're going to tell you what to do, but we're not going to live it. And we're going to dream about it, but we're not building a plan that's realistic. That concerns me. That is always my concern about these unfunded mandates and dreams from Sacramento on down. And I feel like we're sitting in that moment right now here trying to do the same thing at the local level. And I'm really concerned about that. I want to be supportive. I want us to move forward. I'm hoping we can take a few weeks break to send you back and spend some time dedicated with having that conversation with ag, get them at least that opportunity to have a conversation about why we're doing it this way directly, because that was the key critical failure last time. And so I'm hoping that we can go forward with the plan that doesn't feel like we're just dreaming, because just dreaming doesn't get us there. The VMT question, We live in an extremely large and rural county. We're looking at, the state is talking about changing the structure of how they tax us, gas tax to fix the roads based on the change going to EVs. And given that reality, who's going to hurt? It's people who look like me, who live in my district, who have to drive long distances to go to a field that they can't harvest through Zoom. They have to show up in person. And because of that reality, those impacts are going to fall on folks who live in my district that have been pushed there because of the cost of housing on the coast, because of cost of housing in Salinas, because of cost of housing in Gonzales as they get pushed further and further south till they reach San Lucas where they can't drink the water. I mean, it's just, I'm worried that we're creating a framework that's going to cause rural communities like mine to fail. And looking at this right now, the fact that we've not engaged the key industry in those rural communities to have part of that conversation is a big concern for me. I'm just hoping we can come up with something that's realistic and engage all the partners before bringing it back to us, because that was the key issue last time. That's where I'm sitting.
Supervisor Askew, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple thoughts. Just historically, like where we are, that got us to here. Our 2010 general plan included a mitigation that required us to complete a climate action plan and to do a GHG inventory. And we're, 14 years now delayed on delivering on that mitigation that we agreed to, that we're required to fulfill. So I just need to remind everyone that we're out of compliance with what we've agreed to do with our partners. So first of all, that. Second of all, when we adopted our budget earlier this year, we agreed as this board, the recommendation came down not to include a fully staffed, we eliminated a position in our sustainability department. Knowing that there would be impacts to these things that were required to get done. So I think some of this absolutely falls back on this board for not staffing and funding and committing to give our team the resources that they need in order to be able to deliver on the promises that previous boards have made. So I just want to take some of that ownership of responsibility and have it sit on us where it belongs. I do have some questions. I know the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee has been meeting. I'm assuming that this is something that has been working its way through there and was vetted by AAE committee. So a question about that. And then my last question, I guess, and where there was a lot of information presented to us, and I hear the comments from the community and concerns. This has been a protracted process that began with project initiation back in May of 2021. So while there hasn't been, I think, recent contact, I was still on the AA&E committee back in 2021, where we heard from lots of folks and about their concerns in the process and what we wanted to include or not include. And so I have to trust that, given that this is the same project that we're moving forward, that all of that feedback and input was factored into what's coming, the process as it's moving forward. So even if folks weren't engaged recently in recent months, the feedback is still in process. I'm just acknowledging that the protracted timeline, because we don't have a fully staffed program, does make it difficult for people to feel like they're continually involved in the process. It's not an excuse, it's a reality that I'm just acknowledging. So finally, what's before us today, as I'm understanding it, we're not adopting a plan today. We're not signing off on the data that was presented to us today. That was some baseline information that's been collected that needs to be, continue. We need to continue engaging in the outreach and communication and strategy development and prioritization that appears on this timeline to continue through the fall of this year. So we're not saying like that's we're invested in, like those aren't the goals that we're committing to right now. What we're committing to is a contract with a consultant to continue working through this process so that Cora has the resources that she needs to be able to deliver ultimately a plan. The question before us today is whether or not to proceed with the qualified or non-qualified plan and to approve a contract to allow this consultant to continue working with Cora, and to adopt a resolution authorizing staff to continue conducting community outreach and engagement activities for the development and implementation of a community action climate and adoption plan and municipal climate action plan. So correct me if I'm wrong, but by moving forward today, we're simply giving our staff the resources that they need so that we can do the outreach that we hear community asking us for, so that we can develop a plan while working in partnership with our committee assigned to this goal to deliver on a mitigation that we're 12, 14 years overdue and delivering on. Am I off base on that, or what am I misunderstanding?
That is correct. So the option that we've identified today for option 1 and the non-qualified plan does allow us to incorporate the past action and engagement that has happened with our stakeholders, including the ag sector. And as I mentioned, this allows us to focus more on giving credit for the carbon sequestration that is already happening, as well as provide for some programming around carbon soils and other benefits that we would like to see happen in our communities. The plan and just the moment that we're at right now really decides the types of actions that can be included in our plan. And the measures that we've seen today are all subject to review, and nothing is finalized there. That is all something that will have to be reviewed by this board, the Alternative Energy Environment Committee, and our stakeholders as well. So as we tweak that, there is still time to do that engagement, and the resolution today to direct staff to conduct that engagement gives me the authority to go out and work with all of our stakeholders, including the agricultural sector as well.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that, because I think we sort of took a turn in sort of where I think people thought we were going, and we're not necessarily making those commitments. We're not approving a plan today. So the desire for more input, the desire for more engagement, I see that as being 100% what has happened and what will continue happening by moving forward with this contract. So that's my understanding of where we're at. And I'll just say too, this plan and this issue is one of the things I hear so loudly from residents that I talk to. It's one of the things that brings multiple different perspectives, folks who have very different values and perspectives, like they're all together on the desire to see the county get a climate action plan built and in place. I hear it again and again and again. I hear it loudly. I hear it. I see it. So I'm here, and I think we need to move forward. I think we need to fund our sustainability program with the full positions that it was funded with previously. I think we need to approve a contract that allows Cora the resources that she needs to move forward to continue the outreach. And I would like to see our committee, remain involved and help with that outreach so that we're not missing key sectors as we move forward. So that's where I'm at. I'll make a motion to adopt the staff recommendation as outlined here, moving forward with option 1, the non-qualified climate action plan, or non-CEQA qualified action plan. Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
There's two supervisors haven't responded yet. Supervisor Alejo?
Thank you for that acknowledgement, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank Cora, because I know you've been holding up and doing a lot of this work ever on your own since, and your assistant ever since Ashley Paulsworth left us a year and a half ago. It's been a while. And so I want to acknowledge that, first of all. Thank you. All this work that has been done, the outreach schedule that you include in your presentation, just want to say thank you. Second, I have a different view on the resources, because as we know, we've been trying to hire this one position, Cora stepping in as their interim, but it's hard finding staff with expertise in this particular area because we're competing with other 58 counties that are also trying to find staff to do this kind of work. So it's been not an issue of approving a new position. We have one position that we're trying to fill, and we haven't been able to fill it for so long. So where I'm at on this, this did come to the Alternative Energy and Environment Policy Committee. Cora outlined here, the schedule of the many outreach events that were held from May through August. And despite this coming, I think it came to committee about a couple hearings there. I think there's a good argument to be made by our agriculture community, not only the farmers, but the cattlemen, the wine, the Growers and Vintners Association, a few other industries that would be impacted and should have input on a climate action plan. We probably should have them on the schedule of folks, so at least one or two meetings. So I know Corey's done a lot of important work, but I want to respond to what our Farm Bureau and our farmers are saying. Maybe there needs to be some additional time just to allow them to do that, or whether that could be done if the non-qualified strategy or roadmap is taken, the non-qualified CAP is approved today, but to make sure that those types of follow-through could still happen. And that would allow you to hire a consultant to be able to move, but at least you would have that direction on what road are these two options, where are we going to go? I think we need to better explain what are the benefits versus the non-qualified. I think as we discussed in the environmental Alternative Energy and Environment Committee, there seemed to be more flexibility, a shorter timeline. Obviously, anything with CEQA is very expensive, a much longer process, and there might be some more flexibility in the end with the non-qualified than having the CEQA qualified CAP. So I'm kind of supportive, but I also I don't want our friends in AG to say they came, asked for some more time, asked for a meeting because they weren't included on this list. So I think most of these meetings, a lot of the folks that are the nonprofits that are engaged on climate action plans came to these meetings, probably numerous of these meetings. I was glad there was a meeting in Pájaro, Casa de Cultura, thank you. But when AG usually comes to us asking for a meeting, I think it's always in good faith to tell them, yes, let's take a little bit additional time to make sure that you have input on this process. So that's kind of where I'm leaning towards. But I did want to just say, though, at the end of the day, there is some major decisions to be made here, as staff was just indicating, and it did come up to this board about 2-3 years ago when we're talking about the REACH codes that go, ordinances that go above and beyond what the state requires. That's when we had the conversation about electrification versus gas. That was a hard conversation because it's new, and here are mandates that are good if we could reach them, but there's sometimes they come with a heavy cost. Sometimes there's the technological limitations, and sometimes our legislature creates these goals, but then doesn't provide local communities and local governments the means to be able to carry them out. And I think that's even more difficult today with the current budget deficit. It's going to be more challenging because some of these things to accomplish, especially in working class parts of our county where incomes are very limited, where rent and homes are very expensive. Some of these goals that you put on paper in practical terms are very expensive and difficult for our families. For example, what was just mentioned, the goal to convert current homes that use gas into only electricity, to take out stoves and take out heating systems for family would be in the thousands of dollars to be able to do that. And there's some other unique challenges, right? If you look forward, modifying our building codes to only permit gas in future new homes in our county, in the unincorporated Monterey County, there's also limitations there because we've had power outages, and in many of these areas that have been sometimes out in Mary's district, in North County, they're out of power several days, and to then not have the ability to cook or to heat your home during the winter, those exacerbate conditions for families in rural Monterey County. So I just want to put these things out there because at some point we're going to have these difficult conversations because these are the more difficult decisions that if we're going to achieve the numbers that are mandated in these climate action plans, these are to get there. We're doing all this other good work, like we talked today about changing the regular light bulbs to LEDs. We're putting solar panels that are jails and making them more, utilizing more alternative energy. We're transitioning our vehicles into electric as much as possible and practical. We're doing all those things. Those things are all good, but there's more to achieve these. What staff is saying, there's going to be some more very difficult decisions when it comes to really phasing out completely gas stoves and gas heating systems in future homes in Monterey County, or transitioning those that currently have that infrastructure into electrification. So I just want to, I know this is all obvious, we've done this, but I just wanted to illustrate the importance, the gravity. Some of these questions take time to think through for our community, our partners or stakeholders get familiar with. I think at every opportunity, we have to start getting more feedback on what ultimately are going to be some of the real tough decisions in order to achieve some of these carbon reduction goals.
Thank you, Supervisor Alejo. The staff recommendation today starts the ball rolling for us to begin to have those difficult conversations. And as we come back to those, the upcoming sector working group and community group meetings, as well as start to proposing some recommendations for greenhouse gas reduction measures, that's when we can really have those conversations and say what does work for the community and what does not. And for the outreach for our ag sector and the cattlemen and wine growers, this is something that can happen next with this recommendation. And also, if there are other organizations and groups that the board recommends that we should get in touch with, please reach out to me, and we can make that happen as well with our future engagement.
Supervisor Lopez?
Yeah, just a quick question, Corey. I know we mentioned outreach in Pajaro. I was looking at the chart, but I didn't see the other list. Were any of those held in South County?
We have not had any meetings in South County yet. We have had organizations like CCA, Mujeres en Acción, Milpa, Positive Discipline, who do have some service areas in South County. But one of the meetings that I would like to have and a focus that I would like to develop is some South County organizations. So I would appreciate your help and direction there.
Thank you.
I think all the supervisors have touched upon some points that I want to make. And I think we all realize this is really an important issue and finding a way to have a path forward. And Cora, I want to thank you for your work over last year. I know this program's been disrupted in the last year. You've been, as you say, sort of there alone working on it, and you've done a very diligent and I think as good of a job as anybody can do with so much burden on one person, essentially. So thank you for that. As we look at what we have right now and some of the general outlines, I see a lot that's inadequate. And I realize a lot of the models, a lot of the data that we're looking at now is not really complete. And whatever solution we come up with is only as good as the data we put in. And a lot of this it really isn't good. And I understand what we've been trying to fill the position here in this program, and as Supervisor Alejo brought up, it's been hard to fill. There's other counties that are out there that are pushing for it too, but we need to make this a priority. We really need to make it a priority, and I don't see any reason why if we're competing for just a few people in this state, why somebody would want to pick someplace like Fresno or Merced over Monterey. We should have a pretty good case to make, and whatever we've got to do to sweeten that pot to pull in some competent people and some help. I think we need to give that direction right now, today to our staff to get this thing going, because every sector, every interest in this county wants to see something, going here that's going to work. Yes, Supervisor Askew, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I'm just going to ask staff to clarify. I mean, my understanding was when we approved our budget, we have the director position, the sustainability manager position, which we already have elevated to a director position, which I believe does need to be sweetened to the pot again. I believe, Cora, you're currently in that director position, but what we did when we approved our budget was there wasn't a recommendation for a second position. So there is no position we're recruiting for. There's nothing that we've budgeted. There's no position that exists. I think we needed the position. I've always argued for a fully funded sustainability program. I think we need a full-time MA to be working with Cora in that position. We're not hiring for anything currently, and I just wanted to get that clarification.
Sure, and that's what we need to do. We need to make this program a lot more of a priority. That's what,
That is correct. That position was not funded this year. So there is only one position funded for the sustainability program.
Very, very good. That's the point I'm making here. Yeah, we need to move this up and look at this. I know we don't like to adjust things in the middle of a budget year, but I think in this particular case, we need to really seriously look at this and go ahead. At least that's where I'm standing. I don't know where majority of the board is, but I think that's one of the directions we need to give coming out of here today, in my view. I do like the unqualified plan. It gives it more flexibility in many ways, but when I look at some of the direction we have down here, I think ag is exactly right. A lot of these proposals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions that are technological solutions, well, they're just not really there. I personally believe we really got to go with what is simple, what is effective, and carbon sequestration is the most simple, effective, and well-known way to deal with this. I look at some of the proposals we put forth, and I know we had a little email exchange here on the 20% slope on compost that was being recommended not to do, and I know there's some studies up in Napa and elsewhere. I think there's some mixed information about that. I think Alameda, the Resource Conservation District, Alameda County did something on rangeland that did a 15 to 30% evaluating it, and found out there's adding compost actually reduced runoff and didn't have the nitrogen runoff of there. So when you look at our county, we have a lot of agriculture and strawberries and grapes that are on slopes, and it's we need to find ways to work within in there that is affordable, effective, and can be put in place very quickly. We're not going to have tractors out there plowing the fields that are all electric in a short period of time, but we sure can go through and start to sequester carbon. And some of the other things that are down, the ideas on planting trees. And I understand the science isn't all there, but the rough proposal we have now has 300 trees a year could be planted. In a county this size, I don't see why we can't do much more than that, as long as they're not eucalyptus. And there's
Organista.
So there's a lot we can do that is just basic, simple steps without having to get too technical onto this. And I agree. I think I'm okay moving ahead with this. I don't see so much the need. Right, we have to tap the brakes, but we need to grab the steering wheel and get things going in the right direction, and not hit the accelerator necessarily, but keep us going. But we need to get ag into there. Find the ways that we can do and utilize some of these more affordable, more immediate needs that can be done, such as stressed again on carbon sequestration. But there's another element to it too, and that is as we look at what we can really affect, and I know housing's a big thing we can affect. I have some question too whether we're going to be able to really get at 100% electrification, on housing just in a few years. I think that is also a big leap. And there's the other side to that too, is if we don't look at this in the right way, what's the effect it's going to have on housing costs, and what's that effect going to have on our community? We need to go ahead forward with some speed, but we need to make smart decisions. I mean, I do think we can have our cake and eat it too on this. We can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, keeps an economy going, provide the housing that we need. But we need to weigh all this into here. And I don't think we're doing enough as we look at this, what are our options that we have, and maybe there's a great option, but it really creates a great deal on housing costs and will create burdens on people. And there's another option that may be great too. And maybe that's the way, to go, because it's not going to have that impact on the housing. So there's a lot of questions to look at, a lot of things to look at there. And that's why I really think we need to really go through and start, to fund this program in a much more effective way. And that's where, whatever we come out of here today, I want to do that, but we also need to make sure we reach out to every single important group in this community, because this is affecting everybody from, from ag to housing to transportation, which is another part, because I don't think we're going to achieve a whole lot with a lot on transit either, because we're generally a rural county in many ways. But we have to find a solution for this, and we have to go ahead. So that's some of the directions I want to see if we're going to put together here on a go ahead with a motion, which is to come back with a way to fund this program a little more effectively, and perhaps a more elaborated outreach program as well, so we can get all the partners in this county together.
So is that a request for a friendly amendment to the motion to direct our CAO team to take a close look at the staffing for our sustainability program and bring back some options for us to consider? Is that broad enough?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm looking at Debbie too can we do that? Yeah, okay, and that works for you, Supervisor Church? Okay.
It does, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I'll consider that a friendly amendment if the...
Second holds.
Okay, second holds. Okay.
But
again, just for clarity purposes, there was a lot of information presented. We're not adopting that as our plan right now. The electrification goals that were listed on the presentation, as I understand it, we're not adopting that. Those are state. You're just referencing what the state has told everyone is going to happen. So there's still more discussion to be had in all of those spaces.
There needs to be a lot of changes on this plan.
Right.
To fit it so it fits Monterey County.
So I'm just acknowledging those realities, and that there's more outreach to be done, and that we hear the concerns, and we want to make sure that everyone's at the table as we move forward. It would be my personal thoughts on that. So, okay.
So I just want to be clear. I'll be voting no, but the reason is there hasn't been a meeting in my district. The key industry in my district has not been consulted, and I hear you. I hear that folks want to move forward. I can count to 3, right? But I want to be clear about my why. I want the plan to work. I want us to come up with something that can actually be functional. I want to rely on reality. And so with that, I just want to be clear as to why I'm casting my vote today in that direction.
And I do find that concerning, that we haven't engaged in the ag community, we haven't engaged in South County, and that needs to be number one priority coming out of here today, is going to those places.
I've been waiting to ask another question. Cora, so could you explain how can we ensure that we will reach out to ag and to South County over the next, maybe as a priority over the next few weeks, because it is evident that that's missing. So what can we do to make sure that over the next 30 to 60 days, we're going to be able to have those meetings with ag and in South County?
So as initial first steps, I can follow up after this meeting with all the supervisors and request for additional organizations and points of contact that we should be reaching out to, so we make sure to address all those constituents' concerns. And then we can begin setting up different meetings where I can go out into South County and have those presentations. So that's something that we can set up in the next few weeks. Another thing too is that the scope of work, right now it's budgeted for these 2 community workshops and the sector working group. And if we need to have more meetings to really work this out and figure out what works best for the county, that is something that we can do. We just need to augment the contract once we get to that point to make sure that we are developing a work product that does fit the needs of all of our stakeholders.
And Cora, I wanted to clear up a misconception. The state is not telling us what we need to do at this point in time. We have to come up with a climate action plan, but it's up to every local community to adopt strategies. And there's a limited number of strategies that are out there, as you mentioned some of them. But it's really at this point, in conversation with all these stakeholders that we have a meeting with, to decide on what strategies we will adopt in our plan that will make us achieve those possible goals. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the measures that we looked at today, that was a sense first strike at goals and greenhouse gas reduction measures that could get us on that path. And we realized that that was not going in the direction that we wanted for our greenhouse gas emissions, and that there were some serious concerns among our board members and our public with those, so that we need to take time to address those.
And at the end of the day, at the end of the process, who do we submit this climate action plan to? What state agency? And does the state provide any resources to achieve? I know having adopted plan, it was listed that we could compete with some grants. I know grants are limited because we're competing with everyone else. So maybe I answered my own question in terms of what resources are available besides grants. But what if the goals aren't achieved, right? So we have an action plan that we might adopt. What if we don't ban all gas stoves and gas heating systems in the future? What's the teeth in it if we don't achieve those goals by the set dates that are outlined in these climate action plans?
So right now, state law requires us to meet those goals, but the teeth is still something that we're seeing could come down the pipeline. We mentioned SGMA earlier, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and this is a model that has been applied to groundwater, but is something that could also be applied to carbon in the atmosphere as well. So part of what we're trying to do with this while we're complying with our state goals is we know that there will be more legislation coming down the pipeline, and this allows us to get ahead of that so that we have solutions that do work for our community, and so that we can show that Monterey County is being a leader in this field. So right now, the buck stops with us with this plan, and when we have a non-qualified climate action plan, the measures that are enacted, if we wanted to do an increased building code or something like that, those individual policies would have to be submitted to the state. So for the example of building electrification, that would have to go to the California State Housing and Community Development and the Buildings Department there.
So then the climate action plan we adopted, it's only our local document, doesn't get submitted with any state agency?
Correct.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
And Cora, I appreciate that you're going to reach out to all the supervisors here, but I think the one thing we can probably all agree on is that you probably should reach out to the Farm Bureau, with all due haste at this point to pull them in. And again, I just want to emphasize also that I really would like us, as we develop this, to take into consideration housing costs and how we can, work that in so that we can have clean producing housing that's as cheap as possible. Supervisor Askew.
I have to correct a couple narratives just very quickly. So when we say that agriculture hasn't been reached out to as part of this process, I've been in meetings where agriculture was a part of the conversation actively as we talked about our planning. So there should be an active contact list available. The slide shows we had a whole agriculture focus group that occurred back in 2021, 2022. So I just want to correct that narrative that we didn't have any meetings with agriculture. We have. It's just been a long process, and so we need to circle back. So that I just want our narratives to be accurate.
Can we get clarity about that though? Because I'm understanding this to be a separate process. If you're saying, well, we talked to them about greenhouse gas emissions and the portfolio in the past, yes, we did 3 years ago, but are we saying that should suffice, and from here they should not have been contacted before we got to today in terms of our approach?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I mean, but it's all big one. I mean, I'm looking at our slide. It's one big process. We have one process that starts with project initiation, which starts with baseline information, which moves on to education and visioning, which then becomes strategy development. Like these are, it's a process that we're going through. And yes, we need to, and absolutely we need to include agriculture at every step. So just to correct the narrative that agriculture hasn't been engaged on this particular piece of the step, but we have been engaged and active, and we should have an outreach list that's fairly robust that was developed earlier in the
process.
Well, it's apparent that we don't, and it's been 2 years since we reached out. And it's only recently that the question about the CEQA qualified or non-CEQA qualified came to even the Environmental Safety and Environment Committee, and that's a decision we're kind of making today, right? It's the next step. So they're saying, hey, we haven't been brought into this latest question that did go to the committees that were part of these 1, 2, 3, about 8, 9 different committees held since town halls workshops since May, but they haven't been circled in to help us on this more refined decision here that we're deciding.
Okay, so I want to make sure because I hear different things being said. The other thing that when I'm referring to state guidance, there is a building code, and the state is telling us that they're going to be pushing forward electrification goals. So what I'm referencing, again, in the presentation that we just got, where it says, electrification of housing is consistent with statewide guidance, we're anticipating those building codes coming in. We've been notified. We're on notice, right? So I just want to be clear, like, we're not necessarily talking about, we're not making a commitment right now that we're going to go above and beyond what the state is requiring us to do, but this is where we get the chance to have those conversations. So just want our narratives to be, we're not all to be on the same page as we have this conversation.
No, but they're called reach codes for a reason, because they go above and beyond what state law requires, and that's discretionary for local communities to decide on whether they want to implement that or not.
REACH codes are discretionary, but the California Building Code is not discretionary.
And REACH codes are above what state law requires.
Right.
So some quick clarification. Yes, this is all true. We are going to build off our existing contact list that we do have, and this is something that we can share with our supervisors' offices. And any gaps that we see there, we can fill that up, and we can build and we can grow from that. For the REACH codes, the statewide building code is pushing steadily towards all electric. In the most recent edition of the draft code that I've seen, there is now the inclusion of space and water heating as all electric in their baseline models. So there is something that they're starting to see, and we are headed that direction. So it's a little bit of both. The state's pushing us forward, and we need to figure out not only how we can keep up, but how we can best prepare our communities to keep up with it.
Are we ready for a vote on this? So Supervisor Adams?
This is just a sidebar, but I can't help but comment on it. Number one, she's been doing this all by herself. But before she was, Ashley was involved, as we remember. And I happen to recall a rather unpleasant experience that she had when she was presenting this to a representative of one of the big ag industries. And it was very unpleasant. She was virtually yelled at. So, sometimes all communication is not good, but I know that there has been an ongoing focus on reaching out to the ag industry. I know that through the various associations, if nothing else. But be that as it may, I think the fact that you have had other priorities on your plate that we have assigned to you makes it very difficult for you to get anything moving forward. And I very much appreciate what you've been able to do today, bringing this to us finally. And I hope that my colleagues will see fit to congratulate what you've done and to help us build on it by moving forward with your staff recommendation.
Right.
And I call for the question.
Very good. All right. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Right. Motion carries 4-1. And with that, we'll move on to the next presentation from
This
Cora,
poor woman.
which is receive presentation on the potential solar projects at Natividad Medical Center. Over to you again, Cora.
Sure. It's all in a day's work. That's why I'm paid the medium bucks. All right, so now we can pivot to our conversation on some solar procurement options that has been making the rounds through our various committees. And A quick agenda outline that we have today is that we will be discussing the background of these projects and the difference between NIM 2.0 and NIM 3.0, which is Net Energy Metering 2.0 and Net Energy Metering 3.0, these specific projects that we have in mind. We will discuss a summary of the committee recommendations thus far. So we've been to the Alternative Energy Environment Committee, the Budget Committee, the Capital Improvements Committee, and the Debt Advisory Committee. We will then have a discussion on the finances of this project before addressing the procurement discussion that is the main focus of the board today. So a little bit of background. The California Public Utilities Commission transitioned the states from Net Energy Metering 2.0 to the Net Billing Tariff, or Net Energy Metering 3.0. So I will be referring to these as NIM 2.0 and NIM 3.0, and this is just the overall rate scheme that all solar projects in the state of California have to conform to, and dictates how much money we receive for that energy. So under NIM 3.0, excess solar is exported back to the grid that is much less valuable. And solar projects that were filed with their interconnection agreements before April 2023 were locked into NIM 2.0 for 20 years. So in February of 2023, NG Inc. volunteered to be a partner with the county to submit these interconnection agreements for 4 sites, knowing that they would not be, or that they may not be, the final contractor, just so that the county could benefit from the more favorable financial economics of NIM 2.0. The sites that we submitted these applications for were the ITD building at 1590 Moffett Streets, the courthouse at 1200 Aguajita Road, the Natividad Medical Center at 1441 Constitution Boulevard, and 168 and 142 West Alisal. And because it was brought up earlier, I will just say that Natividad Medical Center does buy energy from Central Coast Community Energy, but this project will help us buy significantly less. So the committee recommendations that have been discussed so far is that the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee did recommend that this project advance, and they were split between options 2 and 3 and directed staff to present this discussion to other committees along with their reasoning. So that's why you've all seen me very recently. And we're going to go over these procurement options a little bit further on in the presentation, so just a reminder for the public. The Budget Committee also recommended this project and directed that we work with the county's financial advisors. So we're now working with K&N Financial to move this project forward, and recommended that options 2 and 3 proceed to the board for a full discussion. The Debt Advisory Committee advised us to return to their committee once we have firm pricing and an energy analysis. And this is something that has to happen after the procurement decision so that we can fully evaluate those options. And to be clear today, we are only selecting the option for staff to continue to develop this project. There's still some really big questions along the lines of how much is this truly going to cost? Does the county want to pursue ownership or go through a power purchase agreement? Or is there a hybrid situation that we want to look at where some go forward with power purchase agreements and some move forward as county ownership? These are all questions that will be considered after this decision. On the Capital Improvements Committee, we asked for specific feedback on these sites, and they recommended that the project advance to the board with a 4th option to acquire bids from MIT Systems and NG Inc. So we will discuss that further on as well. So now for brief financial considerations. This was developed by our third-party energy advisors at ARC Alternatives, and what they did is they looked at solar systems that have come online in the last year, and they wanted to do that because with inflation and other things going on with the market, these prices have changed pretty significantly. So looking at that data, they narrowed down these projects into 3 categories of relative size, and were able to assign a dollars per watt cost for those projects. So using that, we have a rough estimate of an initial cost for this project. So that initial cost is $24,600,000. And again, this is something that will need to be further developed once the board selects an option for us to go about the procurement of this process, so that we can have that additional engineering and specific technology specifications to inform those pricing decisions. And as part of this financial consideration, I also wanted to touch a little bit on just the differences between county ownership and a power purchase agreement. So For county ownership, there are pros and cons for both approach, but for ownership, we know that the Inflation Reduction Act direct pay rebate of 30 to 40% has really changed the landscape in how public jurisdictions are able to approach these kinds of projects, and is something that we want to keep in mind. This is likely the most financially beneficial option because we don't have to go through that third party of a power purchase agreement. It also provides additional flexibility in scope and ownership. So when I say flexibility in scope, what I mean is if we are installing solar carports over one of our parking lots, we know that we're already going to be drilling into the ground to do that electrical work. If we wanted to own this system, we can easily add on to that scope of work EV charging stations or battery storage. That provides a little bit more control in that work product moving forward. It also gives us some greater control over site placements and the technology that we would like to be using. Some of the cons of this approach is that the maintenance does fall to the responsibility of the county, and this is something that we would set up most likely with the energy services company that developed the project for us so that we could have a maintenance agreement over the lifetime of the project. There are also considerable debt financing implications for this method of procurement, as that would tie up our real estate and ability for debt financing for future priorities. For power purchase agreements, some of the main pros is that this is an off-balance sheet approach. So this is something that we've seen with our other power purchase agreements that we have in the works. Even though owning those systems outright would have been slightly more financially beneficial, it didn't tie up any of our other capital so that we could pursue other priorities. And just as a quick example, direct ownership over the last 3 projects we brought online would have yielded about $15 million in benefits over their lifetime, and the power purchase agreement brought in around 12 was the end of that analysis. So there are pros and cons of both. No matter what, it would be cheaper than the utilities that we pay for, but we would forgo some of that financial benefit of the Inflation Reduction Act. So now on to our procurement discussion that is the focus of today's meeting. So the next points that we're going to hit, you've all seen before, so I can go through them relatively quickly for the public, and these will remain constant. So the timeline is the first constant consideration, where these systems have a deadline to be operational by April 15th of 2026. So this means fully constructed with permission to operate from PG&E. Lead times for some equipment, mostly the big transformers and switchgears, can take as long as 15 months. So staff does recommend that we have a goal to get to contract with an energy services company in October of 2024. You've already seen this chart, so I will not spend too much time here. But again, this is only a rough estimate and something that we'll need to return to the board through the Debt Advisory Committee and Budget Committee. So this chart illustrates the differences between NIM 2.0 versus 3.0, and really the benefit of being able to get these projects done according to the timeline necessary to keep NIM 2.0 going for us. So this is based off of the utility data of our actual sites over the year of 2023 and hourly load profiles for those buildings for energy consumption, as well as the estimated production of the solar as specified in the interconnection agreements. So just walking through this chart, we can see the system size for each facility, the production in kilowatt hours, as well as the energy exported back to the grid. And then these are the savings between NIM 2 and NIM 3, and then the difference therein. And overall, this turns out to be about $235,000 annually in difference of benefit between NIM 2.0 and NIM 3.0. And I want to add in as well that this is only the production of this modeled system. This does not include any debt financing payments, and it does not include the power purchase agreement apply. So this is only an initial perspective on the revenue that the system can bring in on its own without any other financial considerations. And you can really see the difference in these values in NIM 2.0 and 3.0 over here on the far right with how much energy is exported back to the grid. And we can look at some examples of the government center at 168 West Alisal and the ITD building to understand what that looks like. So this is the hourly load profile for a week in June of 2023. And what you see in the dark blue is the current energy demand of that building. So the workday starts, everyone comes into the office, our computers get fired up, and then you can see that demand spike and increase. In yellow, we see the solar production for that week for the weather-adjusted values, and that matches really well with what we see for our demand in those buildings. And then the light blue that you see is the net demand, so the production minus what is currently in existence. So for all of the weekdays, we see that pretty much all of the solar is being consumed on site and not exported back to the grid. Then on the weekends, the solar peaks above our stable grid load that we have, and then we're exporting more energy back to the grid. This is in comparison to the ITD building at 1590 Moffett, where we have a lot of hardware and servers that are constantly running at a stable baseline load. So the solar is actually peaking much further than the stable demand of that building. So we're exporting a lot more energy back to the grid. So with a building like this, it's much more cost effective for us to be in NIM 2.0 versus 3.0 so that we can be better compensated for that grid energy that we're exporting. Another constant that I would like to remind the board of is Government Code Section 4217. So this is the government code that allows jurisdictions to contract directly with an energy services company, provided that there are measurable energy savings resulting from that project. The other requirement that we have to do following Section 4217 is to make sure that we have 2 weeks public notice for those projects and entering into that contract. So no matter the procurement option that the board selects, whether that is a competitive process or working directly with an energy services company, staff does recommend that we choose this option because of the flexibility it provides for us to choose a contractor and because the nuances of building out one of these projects in a design build format so that we can have an energy services company do the analysis that's necessary for us to even get to a point where we can put a project out into the world. And additionally, the county has full discretion on whether or not to pursue these projects. That is something that is separated by project. So if, for example, there were hesitations that were brought up in the Capital Improvements Committee about 1200 Aguajito, the county can choose to not pursue that project and pursue the others. There's also no financial or legal obligation to continue to work with NG Inc., although I'm certainly appreciative of them reaching out to get these interconnection applications in for us. The only cost to opt out at this time is forgoing the benefit of NIM 2.0 for these projects, which again is around $235,000 each year in annual production value. And I wanted to just discuss next steps in here as well for Constance. So following the board's decision today, staff will continue to develop and work on that option if the board decides to continue these projects. And then an energy services company will provide the engineering and financial analysis that we need to get a better idea of the specifics of this project. ARC Alternatives, our third-party reviewer, will review these findings, and we will work with K&N Financial to develop options for capital decisions for the county for considering ownership or a power purchase agreement. Once we have that information, we can return to the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee, the Budget Committee, Capital Improvements Committee for those specific site considerations, and also our project priorities with ownership and capital, as well as the Debt Advisory Committee for similar questions. Again, our goal is to return to the board in October 2024 to get into contract with an energy services company. So what we will need at that time is a decision on the solar sites that we want to proceed with, as well as a decision on county financing or going with a power purchase agreement. And this is simply because our energy services company partners won't want to order parts unless they know that we understand how the money is going to work out in all of this. So here are the procurement options that were originally presented to the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee with the first question of should the county proceed with these projects? So far, we are at a yes with the first question. And then once we went to the Capital Improvements Committee, we got a fourth option of acquiring bids from both Mint Systems and NG Inc. So we can now get into those options in detail. So option one, I won't spend too much time on because it was not recommended by any of our committees, but this would be working through Mint Systems and the Master Energy Services Agreement that we have in place to quickly bring these projects online. Mint is also the contractor who is working on 3 of our power purchase agreements at the Sheriff's Public Safety Building, the jail at 1414 Natividad, and Schillings Place. The second option is to directly contract with NG Inc. This is the company who worked with us to submit those interconnection applications. Just a quick reminder that the county does not have any existing obligation to select NG Inc., and these interconnection agreements are transferable. NG is a large multinational company with the benefit of many staff and large teams. They're very experienced with working with municipal clients. There is no existing contract in place, so if the board elects to pursue this option, we would work to incorporate as many of the terms from the Master Energy Services Agreement as possible because these have already been reviewed by Public Works and our risk and other legal teams. We are fairly confident in our ability to meet our PG&E deadline with this option. It depends entirely on an expedient contracting process, and again, you can read this as about 75% confidence just because I've not done a project with NG Inc. before and worked with their legal team. If we pursue this option, we would still have ARC alternatives under review to validate those energy designs and also make sure the county is getting a good deal with that procurement option. The third option is running a competitive bid process, and this is something that I've been referring to as a mini bid process. And what this would look like is with the assistance of ARC Alternatives, the county would run a competitive process with solicitations from pre-vetted vendors by ARC Alternatives for their ability to deliver a project under a constrained timeline. So we would work to put out a consistent scope of work that includes maps of approved solar sites, utility data, and bid sheets, as well as a kilowatt-hour production target for these energy services companies to meet. We estimate that this timeframe would take about 5 weeks, so a little bit more condensed than a traditional RFP. This includes 1 week to develop that scope of work, 3 weeks for contractors to apply, and then 1 week for review. NG Inc. and Mint Systems are both able to submit bids under this approach. And there is some increased flexibility of flight designs that we could see because different vendors are more comfortable with different technology solutions. So one company might be able to better meet certain criteria that we could apply to this bid process, such as sparing our trees that we have in our parking lots and best meeting the needs of our county stakeholders. There's also the price benefit of a competitive process with this option, which I know has been discussed at this board before. There is some risk of not meeting the PG&E deadline due to a protracted contracting process from an unknown vendor, but we are confident that we could still get this done, and I wouldn't be presenting it here if that was not the case. The fourth option that came up in the Capital Improvements Committee was to provide an option where staff would acquire from Mint Systems and NG Inc. bids for this project. And similar to option 3, if the board selects this option, we recommend working with ARC Alternatives to develop a consistent scope of work so that these two companies can compare apples to apples with this project. There's a very high confidence in our ability to meet our NEM 2.0 deadline with this. We have existing relationships with both companies at this point, and ARC Alternatives is a great resource to help facilitate this process. So this does have the benefit of a competitive process where both contractors can be afforded access to our facilities for the analysis that they would like to do. There's also more flexibility in pricing if we're looking at financing and power purchase agreements to fit the county's capital priorities. NG's strength is in county ownership and debt financing models, while Mint is very flexible with their financing and may be able to provide more competitive power purchase agreements if that's how the county wants to proceed. So again, there's that increased flexibility in site designs that we're seeing from a competitive process and different technology solutions that can be applied. There's also a slightly smaller coordination burden on staff because there's only 2 vendors and engineering teams that we're working with instead of multiple. So now we are at the moment where we ask for staff direction to continue to develop these projects and select an option for the procurement of these projects with the 4 options that were discussed today. And as a reminder, there is still a lot of review and big questions that have to be answered for these projects, and we'll be making the rounds once we have more information that is made possible by the decision made by the board today. So with that, I will pass that back to the chair and the public for any questions and comments.
Thank you, Cora, for your usual thoroughness and efficiency and pitching a doubleheader today on this as well. First, I am just going to call for the public. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak on this matter? Yes, please come forward. You have 2 minutes.
Is this on? Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Ashu Jain, and I'm with NG. I would like to talk to you about the urgency of this project. So RFPs take a long time just to incorporate all the technical details, which are not yet all finalized. Procurement terms and conditions, receive county staff approval, and issue an RFP will take more like 4 to 6 weeks and not 3 weeks in our opinion. Then allow at least another 6 weeks to arrange site walks, answer questions from bidders, and allowing the bidders time to procure pricing from subs and suppliers. Then you have to allow time for clarifications and rating the proposals. In a nutshell, you're looking at 3 months to select a company. Then you have to allow time to negotiate the contract, do a financing RFP, and get the board approval on the solar contract and financing. That can easily take 2 months because you'll be hitting the December slowdown also in the meantime. So if you're looking to do an RFP, you're looking at final approval sometimes in January. And this project has to be completed by April of 2026. And that's not a lot of time when electrical equipment takes 15 months to procure. And if you miss that deadline by our staff's calculations, you're looking at a loss of $5.8 million, which is way more than you would potentially save in doing an RFP. So compare that to the fact that we filed the interconnection applications, have already done 90% of the engineering. If your board selects us, we can take on this project faster than anyone else. You will have your consultant, ARC, watch over our design and pricing, and we have worked with them before, and you'll have peace of mind that the county is receiving all the best value for this project. Finally, I would like to add that we are the largest energy services company in the state, have a local office in San Jose, have implemented over 400 megawatts of solar for public entities in California, have implemented projects for more than 15 California counties.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
you. And you're with which company?
NG.
Okay. That's right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody online?
Sam Irvine.
Mr. Irvine or Irvine, you have 2 minutes.
Hello, board. Thank you for your time. My name's Sam Irvin, calling from Mint Systems. Thank you for your consideration on this important matter. On behalf of Mint, I'd just like to say we would welcome a competitive process. We know that the county takes its climate action planning seriously, as shown by today's meeting, and we look forward to any opportunity we have to continue to engage with your board and staff to present a good option that makes financial, fiduciary, and environmental sense. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Anybody else? With that, we'll close public comment and bring it back here for the board. Question I would have for you is 2 questions I want to have. On options 3 or 4, is there any difference in timeline on those?
So with options 3 and 4, we are able to stick to the same timeline of about 5 weeks. One of the benefits of this is that we do have this existing relationship with NG and also Mint, so they're able to hit the ground running on their analysis, and we can start coordinating those options much sooner than the week it takes to get that scope of work done. So there is some benefit there. It could be a slightly quicker timeline than option 3, but at a minimum, we would have at least those 5 or 6 weeks from option 3.
And the gentleman that was just up here speaking was saying in terms, it would take, I didn't quite catch it all, but it was 4 to 6 weeks to evaluate these. Would it take you 4 to 6 weeks to evaluate 2 different bids?
It would not. I know that we also have Russell Driver with ARC Alternatives on the line, if you can speak to that, Russell. But
yes,
certainly, I'd be happy to. Good evening, and thanks for giving me the time. We could turn that around faster with 2 known quantities with Mint and NG. I think it would take more like two weeks, maybe 3.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Supervisor Lake, go ahead.
Thank you. This came to various committees, but at the Alternative Energy and Environment Committee, Supervisor Church and I were split on the RFP and versus I was favoring option 2, contracting with NG. And I did express in that meeting my discontent with Mint, who we contracted with first on the existing projects. But when I just wanted to remind my colleagues when a potential application came to us in, I believe it was in mid-May, to apply for a $6 million grant, which sounded appealing, but it came to us literally, we were told here in these chambers that the deadline was a week later, the following Tuesday. The board, the grant sounded good, but what was attached to that was a commitment to, I think, finance or contract for another $50 million in financing with them under that application. This board voted not to take such a big decision without more time to vet that and see if there's other options. We only voted, and Cora had reminded us that we could just submit the application and make the remaining decision at a later point. That's what this board voted on. And I think it was by Friday, our CAO informed us that Mint decided it wouldn't even apply for our county for that particular $6 million grant since we didn't commit to do the rest of the agreement with them. I thought that was, for us, not showing bad faith. We entered in one contract. There was an ability, according to our staff, to make the application and make that the rest of that decision later. Mint didn't like it and pulled out on us, and we were ineligible to apply for that grant, $6 million grant. I was pretty upset when I heard that news because the possibility was there, but they were strong-arming us by saying, since you didn't go with us, we're not even going to apply for you. And with only a few days remaining, we had no other options. So that's where I look to now, look at what other partners are out there who could potentially serve Monterey County in these types of projects. And so that's where I'm looking at other potential experts in this area, and NG certainly has that expertise worldwide, but in particular in California counties. So I just wanted to express that. That's where I'm kind of feeling I left a bad taste in my mouth since May, and I just think that's a poor way of doing business with a partner in this county, and I hope that we might entertain this time because of the short timeline. I agree that I haven't seen RFP go that fast. If it is, it would be a record time in this county. but I'm ready to support for this round, for these potential projects, and keeping the NEM 2.0 benefits going with NG this time, and in future projects where we have more time to open it up for more competitive process. I'm just concerned about the timing. We're 2 months away. That's a very fast time. In theory, it sounds great. We could do this really fast. I just haven't seen it done, so I'm skeptical, just like everyone else. So that's where I want to express my support with in this round going with NG because of the short timeline.
Supervisor Lopez.
Yeah, I would concur. We were also split in committee, but we said let's send it up and let the full board decide on this one. So I concur with Supervisor Alejo's position. I largely want to see a much broader, earlier process for any projects in the future that is open to all the potential partners out there. But I think if this one, given where we are with the timeline, I'd rather not question and be put in the middle. But I want to be clear that any future projects I want opened as broadly as possible to have as many people applying to see what, that was my concern the entire time with Mint. It felt like we were in a box, and I hear we're a little looser box, but in the end, I'd rather feel like there is no box. So I want us to get there. And so I just want that to be part of the direction, anything in the future be as broad as possible, because I do believe there's potential partners out there, and I do think that NG will compete in that process as well. But given where we sit today, I'm comfortable moving forward with NG given the options in front of us.
Supervisor Askew, Adams, any comments?
I think we should move forward. So whatever it takes to get there, I'm in.
Yeah, thank you. And definitely frustrated earlier when we were sort of like I think we changed the rules of the game in that case, so I'm not holding it against. When we make changes so significant as what we did, I think that was on us. So, but I think this is another example of why we need to have a fully staffed, with the number of positions that are necessary for our sustainability team to be able to be managing and bringing all of these things forward. I hear you saying we can turn around an RFP in 5 weeks. I'd love to see that. I'd love to have faith that that's like going to be real, but I'm also we've got a lot of other things, and we just directed you to go spend your time on the phone and meeting with people. I'm agree that we needed an open, I would prefer that we were doing an RFP process. I'll just be really clear about that. However, given where we're at right now, I think we need to move forward, and I don't want to miss out on the opportunity to lock these rates in. So the only other feedback I wanted to provide was, and we did this yesterday at the Capital Improvements Committee, the property at Aguajito, which is the former courthouse, I'm not sure that it's an appropriate site for us to make long-term investments in, given the significant changes and the lack of a master facilities plan that's going to tell us, what our longer-term plans for that property are, or how we intend to use it or not use it. So I'd be hesitant to move forward with that particular site, but only other bit of information I want to just add to the mix here.
And Supervisor Askew, Cora would attest, I did raise that same concern, and maybe if you could elaborate on your reply, because I thought it was a good one, that there'll still be benefits for us there.
Yeah, so this is part of that process of more information that we need. So one thing to consider is the switch from NIM 2.0 to NIM 3.0. This is kind of like the sigma of the energy world, and something that really snuck up on everybody and having to get those interconnection applications in. And as we look at this possibility of the California court moving out in the next 4 years or so from that building, then the expected energy consumption that we have at that building will go down. So accordingly, the energy exports that we have at that site will continue to increase. And under NIM 2.0, we will be compensated much more favorably under that system. So if there's a possibility of future county use of that site, it does make sense to a degree to go ahead and move forward with these projects so that we can lock in those favorable rates for the next 20 years. However, there are some financial implications of that. If the county were to own this system, there are direct pay benefits from the Inflation Reduction Act. This does assume government use of those buildings, and that's something that we need to consider with K&N Financial. So I think what I would ask at this point, since we're not locking ourselves into any of these projects, is to let us go ahead and do that evaluation so that we can have real numbers to show what that benefit would be. If the court were to move out, we know that they're paying for X% of the utility bills because our public works finance is very good at keeping them accountable for that. So that's a calculation that we can do and bring to the Capital Improvements and Budget Committee and the Advisory Committee for you to make a further decision on later.
But is the building seismically safe? No. Sorry, too soon? Too soon?
But I think the site would be the parking lot area?
So it is the parking lot, and also the roof is currently specified, and I can pull up the map if you would like to see it, but there is additional parking lot areas that are available, as well as a parking garage that doesn't have anything on top of it where we could build. So there are possibilities for those constraints.
Well, I'm going to hold to my position because I know I'm going to be on the short end of a 4-1 vote here, but I really I believe that we just need competitive bidding. We put things out. I was in the short end of a 4-1 vote, and we looked at the waste hauling. So it's the same position I have. Don't know if we have any more comments onto it, but besides, we need to have a motion from somebody. Oh, did I go out to the public on this yet? Yes, I did. Yeah, sorry. Losing track things here. It's getting late.
I'll move staff's recommendation of option number 2 for this item.
Okay, and there's a second for Supervisor Lopez. Hey, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No? Motion carries 4-1.
All right, thank you very much.
And with that, I see we're beginning to approach the end of the agenda before dusk. So,
We got to go to Pajaro soon.
County Administrative Officer comments.
No comments from us, thanks.
Okay. So we do have a new referral onto here, which should pass. Who's?
I can speak to the referral if you want real quick. Essentially, the referral is to look at the board's policy concerning abstentions. And right now, in the Monterey County Code, if somebody abstains, the vote goes to the majority vote of this board. So if there's 3 people voting yes and somebody abstains, it would count as a yes vote. The ordinance was adopted in 1979, as best as we can tell. And the rumor, and it is a unsubstantiated rumor, is that the board at the time did that because there was a board member who was abstaining all the time. Other than that, I don't see a legal purpose for that. And if this board would like to revert back to normal treatment of somebody abstaining, they can direct me to come back with a revised ordinance. It literally would be just crossing out the last sentence of the code section.
So, Susan, you're saying you don't need to do a board report and 100-page analysis on this?
That's correct.
And the reason I put this forth is, we don't do abstentions that much, but there are times maybe a supervisor doesn't have enough information on some matter. Could be some other kind of a conflict that you wouldn't want to recuse yourself on, but you wouldn't want to take an abstention. And I just felt it was good to try to correct this little aberration for the last 40 years. Thoughts on that?
Supportive. I hoping we can take a vote today just so I can abstain on it and be like the last abstention.
That's what I was going to do.
See?
I'm going to abstain, Mr. Chair.
We do need a motion if we're, I think we need a motion if we're going to give direction. Do we need a motion on this?
It's just a report out,
You want
right?
to do it, Susan?
If you give me direction, you don't need a formal
Okay.
motion. I'm reading the room, and I'll come back with a revised ordinance.
Very good. Board comments. Supervisor Adams, you got your hand up.
It's Car Week. I'm sure that you have seen a lot of the beautiful cars that are on the road, and you've probably noticed a few other cars that are on the road. So there are some excellent places you can look online, including our own Monterey County website, that give you a heads up on where to avoid the traffic. And I hope that people look at that. And then there's so many other places where you can look at, get advice on where you can go to for free to see some of the beautiful cars. And that's really a wonderful thing to do. I know people are often just so put out over the difficulty in getting around during this week, but it's a world famous event, it really is, and we benefit from it mightily, as do many of the nonprofit organizations and many people in our community. So I hope that you take a deep breath and try to embrace the motor and enjoy what it has to show. And then there's going to be an event at Laguna Seca on Thursday at noon, where we will be doing sort of a ribbon cutting, I think, at that point. And in a way, I guess I'm sort of like officially handing over the keys. But we've come a long way with Friends of Laguna Seca, and I think it's going to turn out just really well. I'm very pleased with how all of this has worked out. So that's it for District 5.
District 3.
I'll be brief. The break meant a lot more work than not, but I had the opportunity to get quite a bit done, especially visiting Joby with some supervisors from North State, looking at some plans and committing to potentially building some eVTOL ports on the North Coast. So I'm going to keep it extremely brief, and I'll leave it there and thank everybody who came to visit me during that break to make that possible. Thanks.
Supervisor Askew.
Thank you. School's back in session for many of our residents, and I just want to say, Supervisor Church, thank you so much for initiating the change of our board meeting schedule. It allowed me to spend time with my family and my son before he enters 7th grade, and it was really special, and I'm just so grateful that I was able to fully focus on him. In addition to that, during the break, I had the opportunity to represent Monterey County at the National Association of Counties annual conference, where we saw a California supervisor, Jimmy Gore, elected and take his role as president of the national organization. Really cool, big deal to have a California representative in that space.
Whose roommate was he in college?
And so also while we were there, I was able to bring, I think, one of the values that we've been able to embody here in Monterey County in support of reproductive rights. And we were able to, after 2 years of having it included as an add-on resolution to the national platform, it's now official language that's included permanently in the national counties platform in support of reproductive rights. So I'm really proud of that work, and I couldn't have done it without the support of many others. But it made for a really exciting week in Florida. I also wanted to just give a quick shout out to everyone who was at the National Night Out celebrations. Such a fun way for families to come together right before school starts. My team was able to attend the events that were held in Salinas, Seaside, and Marina, and we loved seeing so many county departments with their booths, sharing information, doing outreach, talking to community members, and promoting some of the services and jobs that are available working here in local government. So I'll leave my comments at that as well.
And Mr. Chair, I actually hopefully we move our summer schedule even earlier. I like the July month off concept because it didn't work out as well for me because my vacation time came sooner than our 3-week hiatus. But I did want to say on National Night Out, the one here at the Rodeo Grounds in Salinas, I want to acknowledge the District Attorney's Office and our Elections Office, because those are the two that were out there. Hopefully next year we could have some more of our county departments out there for this event. And it was at a new location, which seemed to be a really ideal place for people to stop by, quickly park, and enjoy a National Night Out at the Rodeo Grounds parking lot. Car Week is very exciting. So I hope everybody has a lot of fun here in Monterey County. I think we get about 100,000 visitors. But I did want to just acknowledge that last week there was a small car show, not a big one like the ones on the peninsula here at outside in front of the Steinbeck Center. But the Steinbeck Center hopes to do a Salinas Valley side Car Week event, which there is none. They all take place in the peninsula. But I looked at what occurred last weekend. The kickoff was on Alvarado in Monterey on Friday. But on Saturday, and Sunday, the only events that were going on were at the Laguna Seca, the Prehistorics reunion. So hopefully next year, with the help of the Steinbeck Center and some community partners, we could have a car-related event here in Old Town Salinas. And at the Steinbeck Center, because we do have a lot of amazing classic car owners here in the Salinas Valley. But the idea is maybe we could enhance it with, for example, workshops on people who do air pumps and hydraulic systems, or the amazing car painters and pinstripers of these vehicles, to have another element of cars that you cannot get anywhere else on the peninsula that people would get at a free event here in Old Town Salinas. So I look forward to maybe seeing if that could take off next year, which would be great to just have a car week event in the Salinas Valley. I was at CSAC last week for our executive committee, where we took positions on several ballot initiatives. Those came to legislative committee this week, and they will come to us, I believe, next week for us to vote on the positions on those ballot initiatives. And last but not least, I wanted to wish my chief of staff, Linda Gonzalez, a happy birthday. It was her birthday yesterday, and Linda has been an amazing, really dedicated, really hardworking. You all know her. She's been really amazing. Grew up in East Salinas, still lives there, and was our first Latina chief of staff for a county supervisor in Monterey County. And I am honored that Linda has now worked for me for 14 years, 6 years in the assembly, including being my assembly district director, office director, and now 8 years as my chief of staff here on the Board of Supervisors. So I just want to say, Linda, thank you very much for all your dedication, hard work for our office and for the people of Monterey County. Thanks.
And for me, I'll be brief as well. So want to note that there's, in 40 minutes, a reopening ceremony at the Barro Middle School, which I'll be heading to once this is done. That's been closed since the flooding of last year. Also want to note that on Sunday between 2 and 5 is Dog August Night's adoption event at the Hitchcock Center. So if you need a furry friend, or 2 or 3 or 4 or whole pack, go get some. They, many dogs in need. That's a car-related thing. Yeah. There'll be food trucks, some pet licensing, pet resources, some other animal partners such as Snip Bus will be there, and hope to see folks there and get a dog. And with that, do we read out from closed session?
No reportable action from closed session.
And we'll adjourn then till next Tuesday.